post-Brexit. The Treasury will freeze fuel duty for a further 12 months, abolish the lifetime allowance on tax-free pension savings, which originally stood at £1 million. The energy price guarantee will remain in place for a further 3 months, meaning the average household will pay £2,500 per year, and around 4 million customers on prepayment meters will now also pay the same as those on direct debits. Jeremy Hunt also announced an increase to the defence budget worth £11 billion over the next 5 years. And in a major shake-up of childcare, Jeremy Hunt unveiled every child over the age of 9 months in eligible households would be offered 30 hours of free childcare.
I don't want any parent with a child under 5 to be prevented from working if they want to, because it's damaging to our economy and unfair mainly to women. In eligible households where all adults are working at least 16 hours, we will introduce 30 hours of free childcare, not just for 3- and 4-year-olds, but for every single child over the age of 9 months. It's a package worth, on average, £6,500 every year and reduces their childcare costs by nearly 60%.
But Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the budget is dressing up stagnation as stability.
His opening boast was that things aren't quite as bad now as they were in October last year after the kamikaze budget. And the more that he pretends everything is fine, the more he shows just how out of touch they are. After 13 years of his government, our economy needed major surgery. But like millions across our country, this budget leaves us stuck in the waiting room with only a sticking plaster to hand.
Well, union leaders have also criticised the Chancellor's budget for failing to tackle ongoing strikes across the country. It says thousands of teachers, junior doctors, tube drivers and BBC journalists are taking industrial action over issues including pay, jobs, pensions and conditions. Unite's General Secretary says Jeremy Hunt didn't prioritise saving the NHS and instead delivered a historic betrayal. Schools Minister Nick Gibb is urging the National Education Union to pause the strike action so serious negotiations with the government can go ahead.
We could be having those talks about pay, about teacher workload, about recruitment and retention. That's what we want to talk about. But the National Education Union, if they want to show good faith in those negotiations, they need to pause a strike action. And that strike action is no way to conduct a pay dispute. It inconveniences parents and families, and it's disrupting children's education after 2 years of having their education disrupted during the pandemic.
In other news, the Defence Secretary says Moscow should respect international airspace after Russian jets collided with an American drone over the Black Sea. Ben Wallace says the Americans think the incident is very unprofessional, with the White House accusing Russia of recklessly colliding with its drone. The incident raises fears of an escalation between the two superpowers, with Russia calling it a provocation. 3 men have been arrested after a drive-by shooting outside a church in London, which happened in January. One of them, 19-year-old Alrico Nelson Martin, has been charged with possession of a shotgun with intent to endanger life, as well as 6 other counts of intent. The 2 other men have been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder, and they remain in custody. 4 women and 2 girls, aged 11 and 7, were injured in the incident. A 48-year-old is still undergoing treatment in hospital. You're up to date on GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens now, though. It's back to Patrick.
Yes, welcome along. Massive news day this. It's one of the most anticipated budgets any Chancellor has delivered for a number of years. And Jeremy Hunt's financial plan comes in the midst of a cost of living crisis, the ongoing war in Ukraine having a huge impact on the price of fuel and food. But today, the Chancellor set out how he intends to give Britain a boost with incentives to get parents back to the workplace and businesses to invest and innovate. He made a bold claim that his measures would see a drastic reduction in the rate of inflation, and actually that was fantastic news for a lot of people. A lot of people are saying it blew the Labour Party out the water. We will get stuck into that very shortly. I've got a whole range of guests for you today, ladies and gents. Tories, Labour, Lib Dems, the works. But here, first, is our business economics editor, Liam Halligan, with some more detail on the finer points of what the Chancellor announced today.
This was a steady-as-she-goes budget statement, a budget about not rocking the boat. It was a budget for growth, said Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, an economy proving the doubters wrong. And the economy certainly proved the Office for Budget Responsibility wrong, because the big economic picture, according to the OBR, is that the UK will avoid recession in 2023, a considerable improvement in the economic outlook. Inflation will be down from double digits now to 2.9% during the last 3 months of this year, a considerable easing in the cost of living crisis. Also helping households on energy fuel bills. The Chancellor maintained the price cap on household utilities, electricity and gas combined at £2,500 until June, rather than raising it to £3,000. That will save the average household £160, said the Chancellor. And for hard-pressed households, those using prepayment meters, which tend to be more expensive, additional charges on those will be abolished from July, said the Chancellor, a saving of £45 per year for 4 million cash-strapped families. Fuel and diesel duty was also frozen for the 13th year in a row, pleasing motorists. The 5p cut maintained, though fuel duty remains about 53 pence per litre, with VAT charged on top of that. Then when it came to drinks and cigarettes, duty on draft beer will be frozen, a change that will also be implemented in Northern Ireland after the Windsor framework, because Northern Ireland doesn't have to adhere to EU rules on that, and a packet of 20 cigarettes will go up steeply by about £1.75. A big economic announcement or non-announcement was that corporation tax will go up from 19 to 25%. That's the first rise in this profit tax since the early 1970s, the days of Labour's Dennis Healey. Offsetting that, though, the Chancellor said full expensing would be allowed for 3 years. That means companies, when they invest, can offset the cost of that investment against their corporation tax bill. An important announcement on nuclear power. The Chancellor saying atomic energy will now be classified as environmentally sustainable, meaning it qualifies for more subsidies. And there'll be more government support for the small modular reactors that can be rolled out quickly to be manufactured by Rolls-Royce and others. There was help with childcare. The Tories trying to appeal to young couples in particular. 30 hours a week of free childcare. That will be extended to 1- and 2-year-olds as well as 3- and 4-year-olds, as is currently the case. But because there aren't enough nurseries, that will have to be staged between now and 2025. Back to work. The Chancellor's main claim that this was a budget for growth is all about getting inactive people, making them more active. The disabled will be able to work for longer without losing benefits, and there'll be help for those over 50s, many of who left the workforce during the COVID pandemic, to get back to work, with skills boot camps and all the rest of it. The really big announcement, the Chancellor said that the annual tax-free limit on pension investments will be increased from £40,000 to £60,000, an unthinkably large amount of money for most households. And he said the lifetime allowance would be abolished on those pension savings, claiming that this would mean fewer NHS doctors retired early. In all, said the Chancellor, and in summary, we're following a plan and the plan is working. Labour retorted that the Tories are dressing up stagnation as stability as their expiry date looms closer. What we do know is that the economy, as always, will be the main battleground of the next general election, expected in mid-2024.
Yes, all right, Liam Halligan there. Now, OK, earlier on, Jeremy from Accounts stood up and delivered 50 shades of beige, didn't he? But a lot of people are saying that's actually what the country wanted and needed after quite a considerable period of chaos. I'm going to hit all the key points, or as many of them as we can fit in the course of the next hour, and the hour after that, and then the hour after that. Pensions, childcare, going to talk about that in a second. Growth as well, fantastic. It looks as though the UK is going to avoid a technical recession. This has led calls of Labour now spreading fake news previously by saying that we were slowing down, that we were going to go into a recession. PMQs was a bit of a disaster as well for Keir Starmer. We'll get stuck into that. Latest polling in terms of where Rishi Sunak is now compared to Keir Starmer, and a bit of reaction from the illegal migration bill as well. But yes, in terms of this budget, Siobhan Bailey joins me now and is the Conservative MP for Stroud. Great stuff. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. I know you want to talk about childcare, OK? This was seen as a big win. It also put Labour back in their box in a sense, because Labour were basically calling for this. Just run us through what has been announced.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have been chief pest to Jeremy from Accounts, as you call him, for months and months. And actually, I did a report with the think tank about this. Parents, grandparents, businesses, both inside and outside the childcare sector, have said for a long time this is an economic issue, and particularly women who are unfortunately not working at full tilt because of childcare costs and are taking steps away from the workforce because of the fees that they are paying. So what I've been doing is trying to campaign really hard to make sure that the Treasury took this seriously, and actually what the Treasury have done is taken on my points and gone even further, so I'm pretty pleased.
Yeah, indeed. And obviously the central pledge of Hunt's budget today is the expansion of 30 hours of free childcare for every child over 9 months. He is hoping that the measure will entice more people back to work, like you've just said there, help boost the economy as well. Could raise, he thinks, about £10 billion in further revenue by getting people back to work. And that was a central pillar of this budget, I think. Yeah, compassion to new parents, but also getting that workforce motivated to go and help grow the economy.
Yeah, it's so Patrick, it's so right, because it's twofold with the workforce. It's not just the parents that are telling us that they can't work, but also we've seen 50% fewer childminders over the last 10 years. We've got nurseries that are unfortunately closing down because they feel that they are not able to meet the free, in inverted commas, childcare hours that have been put forward. So there's a massive budding workforce of mainly women, actually, that want to work in the childcare sector that haven't been able to do that, and then we've got the parents on top of that. So I genuinely do think this is a win-win, and for me, actually getting the the Chancellor talking in his budget for growth, talking about childcare, parents and the early years sector as part of growing this country is really important. But I am looking out for how much the childcare sector will get in these hourly rates, because we know we needed more. The Chancellor talked about an extra 30%, and I think we've got to see that happen, because then we can get into this phased increase into more hours for 1- and 2-year-olds as well.
Yeah, look, absolutely. Just talking of some other people who are hopefully going to stay and work for longer, pensioners or people who are thinking of retiring soon. Millions of workers now will get a pension boost after Jeremy Hunt announced big change to the rules in the spring budget, abolish the lifetime pension allowance. Now, the criticism to this is that it helps the wealthiest retirees or people on the brink of retirement the most, and that is supposedly a bad thing. How would you respond to that?
Well, the people that have contacted me most about seeking pension changes are doctors, and we know that the NHS workforce is super important to this country, particularly post-pandemic, when people have stepped away from the NHS. My own mum, nurse for 40 years, she's decided to retire. It was pretty bruising going through the pandemic. But doctors have said repeatedly to MPs all over the country that there needs to be some pension changes. So I totally get why the government has wanted to make these changes. I think we all know with the budgets, the detail, we've got these sort of great red books that we're going to have to go away and read. But I think in terms of what Liam read out earlier with the headline acts, and in terms of certainly things like childcare, I think we can feel that it's a really positive step, and that the Treasury and Jeremy really gets the things that are needed to get growth for the country. And
you know, one thing that stood out for me as well before I get going was how quiet it was on the opposition benches, mainly, I think, because there wasn't a huge amount at face value anyway, to really hammer the Conservative government with this. But no doubt things will emerge. They always do. Look, thank you very much, Siobhan Bailey, there, Conservative MP for Stroud. Initially on childcare, then on to pensions, two of the big ones from today's budget, wasn't it? Now, we did send GBNews reporter Lisa Hartle, actually, to Hertfordshire to find out what parents have been saying, and we're going to take that now, because this is, as I keep emphasising, potentially some of the big winners in today's budget are new mums specifically, really, new parents as a whole. Let's go to Hertfordshire, shall we?
I'm at the Happy Toadstool in Little Haddam in Hertfordshire, and I'm joined by a couple of parents, Amanda and Lisa, and not forgetting little baby Cora as well. What do you guys make of the government's announcement today to do with childcare?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, obviously it's really good that they're supporting mums to try and go back into work, because that's obviously really important. The government are looking for women to return to work and turn to bigger career progression, so therefore it's obviously really good to have that support there available.
Because at the moment it's 3 and 4 year olds that are entitled to 30 hours a week childcare, so now this is going to be for 1 and 2 year olds as well. How is this going to make a difference to your life?
I mean, it's massive for me. So I already have a 2-year-old who, she's actually born on Christmas Day. So as she turns 3, which will be pretty much the start of the new year, that entitles her to currently get some free hours. But with my little boy, who is, by that point, will be in nursery for 4 months, he will have nothing. So it just means a massive difference for us, because I can then put some hours towards his childcare as well, because having 2 in nursery is crippling to go back to work with.
Because childcare is so expensive, isn't it? Like, the UK has got one of the most expensive in the world. So, I mean, how do you guys find childcare prices?
Yeah, I mean, it is obviously really expensive, and I think it's another reason why women need to, be able to return to work and build their careers and obviously earn as much as men do in order to fund and support and pay for childcare and still have their own career as well. I think it's really important.
Do you think this would make a difference for people, some deciding whether to have another child?
Absolutely. I mean, for me especially, there's no way I could think of having a 3rd child and having 3 in childcare while still working. It just wouldn't be plausible. I wouldn't be able to afford it at all. So yeah, it would make a massive difference.
And are there any reservations? Because going forward there might be, I don't know, there's already a difficulty getting some children into childcare, isn't there, waiting lists and things?
Yeah, so we have had 2 nurseries say to us that she wouldn't be able to go into nursery till September 24. And obviously I need a place by October 23. So it is a massively in demand kind of issue that we're facing at the moment.
Completely. I mean, I booked, so my son I booked into nursery when I was about 8 weeks pregnant. So getting ready, because I knew I needed him to go into nursery the same days that my daughter is in nursery. I needed it to match, so I had to think quickly and even do
Yeah, OK, so that was at least a little bit there from Hertfordshire. So that was some new parents just reacting to the latest childcare announcements. We are going to continue to talk about that. I just want to keep you all teased for something we're going to talk about very quickly a bit later on, which is about growth, OK? Because the Labour Party were going absolutely massive on stagnation. They were going on the fact that we're going into a recession, etc. Then Jeremy Hunt popped up and basically said he is now working off revised, more optimistic figures. And this, I mean, you've got to assume it's true, haven't you? Will be great news for us all. I'm just going to run you through the growth forecasts quickly for the next 4 years in order. 1.8%, 2.5%, 2.1% and 1.9%. So there we go. This has led, actually, to calls that the Shadow Chancellor put out fake news earlier on when she was saying that our growth is on the floor, etc. And also it's worth noting that we were the fastest growing G7 economy last year. So we're going to be talking about that and whether or not that is now a blow for the Labour Party, despite the fact one would assume that they would be quite happy that the country is doing better than expected. We will talk about that. I've also got some really fascinating news stats that have dropped about popularity for the immigration bill and also head-to-head popularity between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. So we will talk about all of that. But with me now, back to childcare, is Annabel Denham, previously at the Institute of Economic Affairs and writing reports on women in work as well, good stuff, Annabel, and Ryan Shorthouse as well, Chief Executive at Bright Blue. Right, OK, Annabel, I will start with you. How do you feel about this childcare stuff? Does it go far enough?
I think that there are some good things that the government announced today. For instance, increasing the subsidy towards the 33 hours and the 15 free hours for children over the age of 3. A big problem that we've had until now is that the government has paid a standard rate across the country for those so-called free hours, but it's been below the market rate in some areas, and that has forced nurseries to cross-subsidise with children under the age of 3 or children who require wraparound care, which has made costs exorbitant for those parents. So I think if you're going to give a subsidy for children aged 3 and over, then it's good that the government is at least going to be paying what nurseries need in order to stay above water. The other positive is that they've loosened teacher-to-child ratios. Now, for all the cries that this is some massive deregulation of the childcare, it isn't. We're going from 1 to 4 to 1 to 5, bringing it in line with Scotland. Let's not forget that some countries in Europe, like Denmark and Germany, don't have any teacher-to-child ratios at all. They actually allow individual providers to decide what is in the best needs of the children in their care, which is entirely sensible. They know far better than Whitehall bureaucrats. So that's the good stuff. But the bad stuff is that what we're seeing is the government moving far closer towards total nationalisation of childcare. Obviously, we now have the subsidy going for children aged 9 months and over. That's actually before statutory maternity leave comes to an end at 52 weeks. And the state essentially taking on the role of parent and this assumption that it can parent our children better than we can. So that I'm opposed to.
Well, it's interesting that you raise that point. Now, Ryan, I'm going to hit you with an early contender for most controversial email of the day, and it's come through from Kim, OK? Now, Kim says, women need to stay at home and do their job to bring children up to at least the age of 11. They are getting childcare out of our taxpayers' money to earn more money. It's a joke. If women stayed at home, more men could work, and that's a good thing. I'm assuming you don't agree with Kim.
Well, I think what's important is that people are given choice. Women and men decide what's in their best interest to looking after their children, particularly when they're very young. But there's lots of evidence to suggest that the childcare costs are putting off, particularly women, from entering the labour market. And today's announcements, you know, as you said earlier in the show, it was very much a kind of steady as she goes sort of budget. But actually, the childcare announcements were very solid and very bold and quite considerable. And, you know, I think you have to take into account that improving childcare affordability in this country, and childcare, the costs are so crippling and uniquely expensive in this country, that sorting it is good for economic growth, gets more people back in the labour market. It's good for long-term prosperity. There's lots of evidence that kids, particularly from deprived backgrounds, who access high-quality formal childcare have better education in the long term. But it's also good for family formation and relationship stability. There's lots of evidence that millennials, my generation, fewer of them are having children because it costs so much to raise a family, and particularly to pay for childcare. So I think today's announcements are broadly very positive. I don't agree that it's a nationalisation of childcare, because
that's what I want to go back on. That's what I want to go back on.
80% of the market.
Yeah, OK, well, Annabelle, just on that, let me go to Annabelle because we're running out of time. Annabelle, I want to come back on that. So what is your idea about it being the nationalisation of childcare? And if it does mean that women can go back to work, we can get economic growth, we might be able to get proper, decent population growth as well, what's the problem with that?
Well, first I'd say that there are other ways of bringing down the costs of childcare that don't involve a massive government subsidy that's going to cost around £10 billion a year. From now on, we could deregulate further, particularly making it easier for people to become childminders, making it easier for family members to look after your children. And you could also give vouchers to parents. You know, generally my view is that people are much happier when they're given money or allowed to keep more of their own money than they are by the government giving them stuff that they may or may not use. The subsidy itself, actually, an existing subsidy, is one for mostly middle-class families, if you look at the uptake. And when it comes to female labour market participation, there's very limited evidence to suggest that this increasing childcare affordability and accessibility has a measurable impact on the number of women who are going back to work. So I think we should take that with a dose of scepticism, but also just be asking why the government is so keen to take very young children away from their parents from such a young age and for such long periods of time. I think it needs a fundamental rethink of why it's involved in childcare at all, and what its objectives are and how it's going to measure them.
All right, look, Ryan, can I offer you my sincere apologies for a deeply unbalanced interview here, because I have now catastrophically run out of time, which is my fault entirely. But, Ryan, thank you very much for turning up nonetheless. It was Ryan Shorthouse, our Chief Executive of Bright Blue. Well, I'm not surprised, yeah. And Annabelle Denham as well, who is previously of the Institute of Economic Affairs and writes reports on women in work. There we go. I think maybe in keeping with the tone of that interview, it was correct that the lady present spoke for longer. Anyway, well, Jeremy Hunt's spring budget isn't the only big event in Westminster today. As thousands of striking workers, they're out in force yet again in the biggest walkout since the current wave of strikes began last year. We've got junior doctors, teachers, tube drivers, lecturers, civil servants, apparently journalists at the BBC as well, although, yeah, you know. Anyway, they're all taking industrial action deliberately on budget day to call for massive public sector pay increases. Is the general strike that many have foretold? Is that happening? Anyway, with me now is Olivia Utley, GBNews political reporter, who is somewhere near the striking action. Good stuff. What's going on?
I am in Westminster, and just over there I can see the PCS, that's the public sector, the civil servants picket line. And yes, as you say, it's the biggest general strike that we've seen in a decade. It's all the same problems that we've heard about in all the previous strikes. These unions are pushing for big pay increases over and above inflation, and the government is essentially pushing back and saying that any sort of pay rises on that scale would be massively inflationary. And obviously Rishi Sunak's biggest goal in the next couple of years is to cut down inflation. Now, I've been speaking to a couple of teachers today who are now just getting very worried, particularly about the teachers' strikes, and their concern, they're not striking themselves, is that the NEU, the teaching union, just isn't getting around the table to talk to the government, whereas other unions are speaking to the government, the NEU isn't. And they're worried that teachers are going to actually miss out on any sort of deal which is agreed with the other sectors. But I think what we're seeing today is, for a long time we saw those unions claiming that they weren't working in collaboration with each other. They weren't trying to cause maximum possible chaos for political reasons. It was simply that their strikes happened to coincide. Well, now we're seeing a softening of that line from the unions. The unions are essentially admitting that, yes, there is some coordinated strike action here, which suggests it is getting very political indeed. Now, they won't be happy with what happened in the budget today. There was no mention of public sector pay, as we expected, but it will certainly come as a disappointment to some.
Yeah, Olivia, look, thank you very much for that. We can hear some of the protests taking place in the background. Olivia Utley there, GBNews political reporter. Now, Olivia rightly said there wasn't any mention, really, of public sector pay in the budget. But there also, remarkably, wasn't any mention of it at PMQs either. This is something I'm keen to pick up on and not just sweep under the carpet here on GBNews, which was an absolute disaster, in my view, from Keir Starmer at PMQs. Used his 6 questions to talk almost exclusively about Gary Lineker, when there were tens of thousands, according to some reports, hundreds of thousands of people shouting at him from outside the House of Commons, public sector workers, saying we want a pay rise. And Keir Starmer, remarkably, went off on Gary Lineker, a millionaire footballer and TV presenter, having rather a hard time, and the Tories wanting to allegedly get him out of a job. I found that bizarre. It did also allow Rishi Sunak to essentially rattle off his achievements: AUKUS, illegal migration bill, defence spending, the latest growth figures as well, which Jeremy Hunt released later on. As I've said, we're going to be returning to those. I am also going to be talking about, the cost of these things, ladies and gentlemen. Cigarettes, they're going up by £1.15 per pack, which I think any smoker out there will agree is an absolute shocker. Other people might say it's good for your health, but I'm sick of that lot. Also, booze as well. Lovely news if you like a nice pint of good, warm British ale. Bad news if you like anything else. So there we go. We'll talk about all of those things and how the budget affects you in our big bumper budget special. But right now, it's time for your latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just gone 3:30. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom. Jeremy Hunt has announced his first budget as Chancellor, vowing to encourage millions to rejoin the workforce and boost financial growth. The Chancellor says the OBR now forecasts the UK will no longer enter a technical recession this year. It says inflation is predicted to fall from 10.7% at the end of last year to 2.9% by the end of 2023. Labour responded by accusing the government of a managed decline of the country, describing the budget as a sticking plaster. Well, here are some of the key points. The Chancellor announced a change in the duty on draft products sold in pubs, allowing them to be up to 11 pence lower than supermarkets. The Treasury will freeze fuel duty for a further 12 months, abolish the lifetime allowance on tax-free pension savings, which originally stood at £1 million. The energy price guarantee will remain in place for another 3 months, meaning the average household will pay £2,500 per year, and 4 million customers on prepayment meters will now also pay the same as those on direct debits. He also announced an increase to the defence budget worth £11 billion over the next 5 years. And in a major shake-up of childcare, Jeremy Hunt unveiled every child over the age of 9 months in eligible households would be offered 30 hours of free care. Well, union leaders have criticised the Chancellor's budget for failing to tackle ongoing strikes across the country. It's as thousands of teachers, junior doctors, tube drivers and BBC journalists are taking industrial action over issues including pay, jobs, pensions and conditions. Unite's General Secretary says Jeremy Hunt didn't prioritise saving the NHS and instead delivered a historic betrayal. The Defence Secretary says Moscow should respect international airspace after Russian jets collided with an American drone over the Black Sea. Ben Wallace says America has called the incident unprofessional, with the White House accusing Russia of recklessly colliding with its drone. It raises fears of an escalation between the two superpowers, with Russia calling it a provocation. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB, digital radio and TuneIn. This is GB News now. It's back to Patrick.
Yes, OK, right, delving into the inbox quickly, bit of reaction from you early doors about this budget, gbviews at gbnews.uk. I tell you one thing that's really standing out to me, it was fascinating this, is the amount of women who are getting in touch with me to say that they are not in favour of this childcare support. 30 hours free childcare, children aged 1 and 2. It's designed, on paper anyway, obviously, to get mums back to work earlier. They're saying that'll help grow the economy, might incentivise people to reproduce more as well and get the population growing a bit and all of that stuff. Susan's been on, says, I agree with the lady you emailed in earlier. That was Kim, 2 regular emailers and viewers on this show. Says, I never understood why women have children and then farm them out to complete strangers. The government should encourage mums to stay at home for at least the first 5 years of their child's life. Well, it's fascinating, that, really, isn't it? So there you go. Keep your views coming in. I mean, I wasn't necessarily expecting that, but maybe I should have done. I don't know. Maybe more of a traditional family unit, still inspiring lots of you out there. Get in touch on all of that. Yeah, and loads of you as well getting in to talk about the pension side of things. We are going to be talking about an issue that certainly used to be very close to my heart as well, which is booze. Yes, that's right, because what does it mean for the price of a pint and other stuff? And I've got someone else here who's been on. Sadie says, this budget is the most uninspired budget. Look, Sadie, I know. I was driving into work earlier on. I had Jeremy from Accounts on the radio and, you know, it did make me contemplate whether or not I need to just park up and decide to not bother throwing up, but there we go. But, nevertheless, it affects all of us, doesn't it? So, Sadie continues and says, all well and good sorting childcare and pensions, but if taxpayers and businesses don't get tax cuts, it won't move the economy. That is Sadie's view. Look, OK, I've got all sorts coming your way very shortly, because there's loads more to come between now and the end of the hour. If you are a small business owner, sick and tired of being clobbered in recent years, find out if the Chancellor had good or bad news for you. And I think you'll agree, everyone needs a stiff drink after Jeremy from Accounts delivered his budget. Find out how much more it's going to cost you to get leathered this evening. I'm Patrick Christys and this is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Right, welcome back. Now, what will the budget measures mean for entrepreneurs and those who own their own business? Many small business owners may welcome the planned 12 new investment zones and regeneration projects in certain towns, but also say the personal and business costs of operating in a cost of living crisis have wreaked havoc on their enterprises. Can this budget deliver growth at last? With me now is Craig Beaumont, Chief of External Affairs at the Federation of Small Businesses. Thank you very, very much. Oh, no, he's dropped out. Oh, well, there you go. You and me both in a way, actually, Craig. I'm going to delve into the inbox very shortly and just to say, yes, somebody did manage to mistake one of the things I said earlier. Well, I was going to be talking very shortly about booze and not something else with an extra B in it. So there you go. Sorry to disappoint there. It's not page 3 of the Old Sun. Joining me now, though, is Darren McCaffrey, who's GB News' political editor, or Craig. You know what? Why not? Craig, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Craig Beaumont there, Chief of External Affairs, the Federation of Small Businesses. Look, talk to me about this, because a lot of business owners are up in arms. They're saying we are getting clobbered left, right and centre. We had the pandemic, we've got the added energy costs, and, you know, we've got corporation tax, and we just can't survive.
Yeah, I think today's budget will leave many small business owners watching today feeling rather shortchanged. You know, we all understand how businesses work. Budgets are similar. They're about tough choices. And yet they've heard today about billions of pounds of energy help to households for 3 months, but nothing to all those small businesses who fixed last year at a really high rate, discounted for 6 months, but will now see their bills rise 4 times on April the 1st. And then they see on business taxes with this massive cost of writing down capital allowances, which is £27 billion over the next 3 years. But that's for big business. It's not for small businesses. And we don't agree that trickle-down economics works anyway. So on those 2 big ticket items, there was nothing. And then on the more moderate stuff, yeah, there were some proposals on work. They're very focused on outputs rather than outcomes, you know, things like work coaches, things like, you know, more resources for job centres, but not actually for small employers. And similarly on childcare, I mean, childcare looks really good, and I'm pleased to see you had loads of feedback on that. You know, it has to be practical, and it has to work for providers. So we're still going to work through the practicalities of that and make sure it's delivered well. So I would say not terribly impressed today.
All right, well, look, just tell me exactly what you want then. If you were Jeremy Hunt, and by the way, can I just say, if that doesn't go viral, that picture of him there, like, with his red box. But anyway, there we go. What would you have done? So you're there, you know, Federation of Small Businesses. What do you want? Because, you know, at the minute, I'm thinking, well, if I was going to start a small business, I'd be tempted to maybe not do it in Britain.
Yeah, we've lost 500,000 small businesses over the last 2 years, and now we need to get them back. We need people like me. I'm in a job, I'm employed, but I should be encouraged to kind of set up in business, to resign my job, use my expertise, and become a small business owner. But it's actually really expensive now. Corporation tax has gone up. The small business threshold for that is very low. It's far too low, and the government refused today to increase that. And now when the government does have some money to help, it kind of sends it in strange directions. So I don't think now is a brilliant time to start up, and that's a terrible message for small business owners or potential ones to get. So I think, you know, we've got to look forward. We've got to be positive. People have got to be positive. We've got the autumn statement coming up, which will be the 1 year to go to an election from a chancellor that hopefully will be more minded to help 5.5 million.
Can you just explain to me why Jeremy Hunt hasn't done this? You know, it has been a week of bang average footballing analogies with Gary Lineker, but to just see this on through, really, is this a bit of an own goal from Jeremy Hunt? Because we are a nation of shopkeepers, aren't we, here? And we like the entrepreneur, and we're very successful at it. And Britain has a great track record of creating some wonderful business minds who can navigate their way through economic minefields. Why not incentivise them, or why make it more difficult for your average common man and woman with a small business somewhere on a high street up north in Bury or Bradford or whatever, who has got every chance of wanting to vote Tory at the next election? Why should they?
Well, at the moment, I don't think they would be motivated to vote for the Conservative Party from today. If you look about all these small businesses in all these local communities, we've all got them all around us. These people were not seen today. And I am concerned that if you look at the Treasury reaction, you look at how Treasury's communicated things, it's a very McKinsey kind of corporate approach to business. It's going to be big business that helps. I mean, if you think about a big business and its plans for the next year, it's probably already agreed what it's going to do. So this huge tax cut won't be very effective, a bit like the super deduction. So we should be looking at what can you do locally? How do small businesses employ one extra person? How do you reduce their tax bill a bit to incentivize them to invest with a help to green thing? If you want to tackle net zero and reduce energy use, help a small business to buy the solar panel or the heat pump. Where was that today? It was nowhere. So it was just a lack of vision and a bit of an addiction, I think, to big business.
All right, good stuff, Craig. Thank you very much. Great to have you on in the end. Craig Beaumont there, Chief of External Affairs at the Federation of Small Businesses. Now a man who needs no introduction but is getting one twice. It's Darren McCaffrey, GB News' political editor. And Darren, thank you very much. I am keen... You are the steps of Downing Street. Fantastic. I am keen to get the reaction from the opposite side of the chamber today. It was quite a muted response, and I can't help but wonder whether or not, for a large part, Jeremy Hunt has sucked the wind out of Labour's sails. Some would say that Labour's in recession.
Well, so you're right in saying that the response was pretty muted, though one could say the budget itself was pretty muted. But Labour's feels a little aggrieved when you look at, let's say, childcare, for example, effectively nicking one of Labour's key policies. It's what good government does. It's what Tony Blair did an awful lot of damage to the Conservative Party in the late 90s and early noughties. He just kept picking the good policies that the opposition came with, and Labour felt a little bit of that today. Though in saying that, Labour's big message was essentially, do you feel any better off, really? Will you feel any better off at the time of the next election, given the fact the Conservative Party have been in power for 13, 14 years? In fact, that was shouted at Jeremy Hunt quite a few times today, effectively saying, you've been in power for 13 years, and yet you're suggesting things aren't quite as bad as we expected, given the fact that the previous Conservative administration had completely messed things up. In saying that, I think the really interesting politically is not whether Labour Party opposes aspects of this budget. Of course they are. This is a budget that does primarily, it must be said, help middle-class families. The big question is this going to be enough for the Conservative right? For those that supported Liz Truss, that have got growth and low tax at the centre of what they ideologically believe in, because believe it or not, Patrick, the tax burden as a proportion of GDP is still going to go up after this budget. There are going to be millions more people next month paying tax as those tax thresholds increase, dragging more and more people into paying the top rate of tax, and that's going to have a big impact on living standards. I think people do sometimes forget this, that they look at inflation inflation is one of the key drivers of the curb, if you like, on living standards, but taxation, increased taxation is part of that narrative too. So I think the interesting aspect will not necessarily be what Labour has to say, it'll be how those on the right of the Conservative Party react to what they heard today.
Yeah, look, absolutely. But at PMQs today, Keir Starmer just, I think, completely messed it up, in my view. I mean, he had tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of striking public sector workers shouting at him from outside, and he led with basically 6 questions on millionaire Gary Lineker, much, I think, to the delight of Rishi Sunak, who was able to just rattle off a list of his achievements so far. And then I look at the fact that Labour have been accused of putting out some quotes-unquote fake news in terms of their growth figures, etc., and those growth figures now are, albeit marginally, but better than expected. A Redfield and Wilton poll showing Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak separated by just 1 point in the polls now in blue wall seats. Illegal migration, Matt Goodwin saying that more than half of the country back the Tories' illegal migration bill. I mean, actually, is this quite a bad day for Labour?
Yeah, I think you're right in saying that. I'm not entirely... can't really think why Keir Starmer decided to go on the issue of the BBC, given the fact that the issue has been essentially resolved. You know, Manchester Day is back, Gary Lineker's back. It's a story that felt much more like last week than this week. Also an odd one in, as you've rightly pointed out, on a budget day. Yes, he gets to respond to Jeremy Hunt, but there's a hell of a lot of other stuff happening aside from a row about the BBC that has somewhat passed. And I think Rishi Sunak has, if you look at those polls, has had a good couple of weeks. I mean, I've spent quite a lot with him in the last couple of days, coming back and forth from the United States. It's pretty clear he's pretty chipper. He's pleased with that Windsor framework. He's pleased with the deal he's done with Emmanuel Macron. He's pleased with the publicity he's around that AUKUS deal with the submarines in San Diego. He feels that the Conservative kind of backbenchers are pretty muted in terms of any sense of stepping out of line with government policy, and he might well be pleased with the reaction to this budget. So yes, it is fair to say that Rishi Sunak has turned the ship slightly, but in the end, as I say, there is always in some ways more trouble for a government because governments are very easy to make missteps. As for Labour, Keir Starmer has had pretty good couple of months, though must be said the government have necessarily helped him, haven't they, quite a lot in making mistakes. But today I do think he got it wrong, and Rishi Sunak was able to bat away those questions. One question he did struggle with, though, in fact he refused to answer, he was asked a couple of times, was about the heating of his swimming pool, much to the delight of the opposition when Jeremy Hunt announced, of course, that the government were going to help public swimming pools up and down the country in today's budget.
Yeah, no, look, Darren, thank you very, very much. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor on Downing Street. Good stuff. Yeah, it's important not to forget PMQs as well in light of all this budget stuff, because there is other news out there as well. Look, the emails are coming in thick and fast. I won't go to them just yet because you're a bit pressed for time, but I am fascinated by what I'm seeing, genuinely. So please keep your hot takes on this budget coming in. It is opening my eyes, actually, to completely different takes on this thing. So keep it coming in. GBViews at gbnews.uk. A great one here from Zoe. I'll go to yours shortly, Zoe. But let's look at what the budget means for Britain's drinkers. That's right. The Chancellor announced he was freezing the duty on draft products in pubs, much to the celebration of punters. Exactly, Nigel Farage, be over the moon with this. From August, though, pint duty will be 11 pence less than in the supermarkets, but the cost of other boozy bevs may still feel the bite of the cost of living crisis, as alcohol duty will still rise in line with inflation, ballooning a bottle of wine by 45 pence. Good grief. But there was some good news that may prompt landlords to raise a glass to toast, because British... I have to read this out now. British ale may be warm, but the duty on a pint is frozen. Jeremy Hunt said that. So let's just take a look at what's on offer, shall we? From the 1st of August, there will be increased draft relief. Duty on draft products in pubs will be up to 11p lower than supermarkets. It will be maintained as part of a new Brexit pubs guarantee. And Jeremy Hunt said the change will apply to every pub in Northern Ireland due to the Windsor framework, trying to there basically say it's a double win, isn't it, for Rishi Sunak and the Tories. With me now is Matthew Russell, co-founder of Copper Rivet Distillery. Great stuff. Look, what do you make of this? I mean, I suppose, just from what I can gather here, it's good news if you like a warm pint, bad news if you like everything else.
It's great news for Nigel Farage, isn't it? I mean, he likes a warm pint. In my pub, most of the pints aren't warm; they're cold. They're Stella Artois, they're Peroni. You know, they're not your archetypal British pint. So yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed, to be honest, because 35% of drinks consumed in a pub are spirits, and there's nothing to help the spirits industry.
OK, all right, but what should he have really done, and what will the knock-on effects of this be? So it's all going through as it is, right? What will this mean? Will this just mean that people are even less likely to go to the pub? Are we witnessing the death of the great British pub?
Well, I think, I can only speak for the spirits industry, and particularly Copper Rivet Distillery, one of the smaller distilleries out there. We've had huge, as everybody has, huge 4 times energy price inflation. Grain that we produce our spirits from has gone up 60% because of fertilizer costs, etc., etc. Glass has gone up in the region in the last 2 years of about 60%. And then the Chancellor wants to add on, another £1 a bottle of tax take when it's already a substantial proportion of the cost of a bottle of spirits.
I get all of this. I mean, I suppose as well you could argue it's a bit of an attack on fun stuff as well. I mean, people like to go out and have a glass of gin, or not maybe a pint of gin, of course, that used to be me back in the day. But, all the spirits and things like that, maybe it's a bit of an attack on that. Was it an easy one for him to do? Because a lot of people will just say, oh, well, it's bad for you, so they won't mind taxing it to high heaven.
I think that's exactly it. I think he's taken a bit of an easy win here in saying, well, I'm not going to freeze the duty on spirits. I will play to the audience with that British pint element. But the truth of the matter is, the spirits industry is a big export. There's 350 distilleries. I think the recent surveys is that up to 80% of the small distilleries fear closure in the next year. That's a lot of employment. That's a lot of skill that we're losing, and potential exports to foreign countries that like British spirits. I mean, it's crazy that he doesn't look at this. Go on, sorry.
Well, no, sorry, just we're a bit pressed for time. I was going to say, I think we leave it on a very good point there, because actually that is a massive part of British culture. We do think of the old warm pint of ale, but we do export a huge amount of spirits to other nations and do very, very well out of it. And it would be a shame to lose that culture, that expertise, and those jobs. I am going to have to park it there, I'm afraid. But good luck to you. Thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. That was, of course, Matthew Russell, who's co-founder of the Copper Rivet Distillery. Like I said there, if you like your booze, then it's all right if you like a lukewarm pint. Not great if you like everything else. With me now, though, is Jasmine Birtles, who's personal finance expert. Thank you very much, Jasmine. Great to have you on the show. Now, we started this hour with childcare. We're going to end it with childcare. In the next hour, I'm whizzing on to pensions and all sorts of stuff, and a deck of fags as well. Why not? But what is your take on these childcare measures? A lot of pushback in the inbox, Jasmine. People saying that, the mothers should be looking after their kids at home. I'm just reading what I've got here. Mothers should be looking after their kids at home, and that this is an incentive to palm them off on someone else. Your views?
Well, yes and no. It depends on where you are, really, in terms of work. I mean, I don't have children. I've got lots of friends who don't have children. I've just had a text from one of them saying, why should I pay for other people to have their children looked after? So there's that argument as well. I've also heard from some employment agencies that actually this is only going to bring in a few tens of thousands of extra workers. They don't think, although they like the idea, they don't think it's going to do what the Chancellor says, that it's going to massively increase the number of people in employment or coming and filling in these jobs. However, although I think it's probably overall a pretty decent idea, what I would have liked to have seen was something that would help everybody, not just parents. So I would have preferred to see the personal allowance, the tax allowance, unfrozen, so that we all can keep more of the money that we earn before we start to pay tax on it. That, I think, would have been a fairer move to make.
And just on this, actually, veering away from childcare, but the opposition to this budget might mostly come from within the Conservative Party, possibly on that point that you've just raised there, which is about, actually, people are still being taxed to the hind teeth, aren't they? And that is, I think, something that you would have liked to have seen changed.
Yes, I would have liked to have seen that changed. Jeremy Hunt said that this is a growth budget. I don't honestly feel that it was, really, particularly because of the corporation tax going up. I don't think that's a growth budget. I think Liz Truss's budget was a growth budget, reducing tax, certainly reducing tax on business. So, nice that he's been helping people here. I think he's taken ideas out of the Labour playbook, as Keir Starmer says. I really do. In many ways, it's a socialist budget. I don't think it's the growth budget that it could have been if he had reduced the taxes across the board, for all earners.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, thank you very much, Jasmine. Jasmine Birtles there, who is a personal finance expert. Keep your views coming in thick and fast, people. GBviews@gbnews.uk. This budget literally affects all of us in one way or another. I'm going to be focusing a bit on pensions, on cigarettes, on public sector workers, all of that coming your way, and much, much more. There we go. I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, it is a massive news day today, ladies and gents. It's, of course, budget day. Jeremy from Accounts rocked up and delivered, well, quite a dull deal, but we're going to pick the bones out of it nonetheless. First, though, it is, of course, energy and the cost of living as a broader package. Yes, that's right. Good news for people about the energy price cap. I'll fill you in on the finer points a little bit later on. It does come amid a backdrop, though, doesn't it, of tens of thousands of people, public sector workers, very angry, marching on Westminster as we speak. We've got people in very different public sector jobs who are on strike today. We will go to those strikes and keep you up to date on all of those. And yes, of course, then there's this, isn't there? Indeed, yes, smokers. A terrible deal for smokers today. I mean, it goes up by about £1.15 per packet of cigarettes. And if you know any smokers, I don't, but if you do, I imagine they'll be quite angry about the whole thing. Anyway, stay tuned and we'll talk about all of that. Yes, OK, get your views coming in. Just in the round today about what bits of the budget affect you the most. Are you happy with it? Are you not happy with it? gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll keep it general today, ladies and gentlemen, but right now it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Well, Jeremy Hunt has set out his plan for the British economy in his first budget as Chancellor, and he's vowed to encourage millions of people to rejoin the workforce and boost financial growth. The Chancellor says the Office for Budget Responsibility now forecasts the UK will no longer enter a technical recession this year. And it says the UK economy is on the right track, with inflation predicted to fall from 10.7% in the final quarter of last year to 2.9% by the end of 2023. Labour, for its part, has accused the government of a managed decline of the country and said the budget was just a sticking plaster. In a speech lasting almost an hour earlier on today, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, announced measures including a change in the duty on draft products in pubs, allowing them to be up to 11 pence lower than in supermarkets, something he said was only possible post-Brexit. The Treasury will freeze fuel duty for a further 12 months and abolish the lifetime allowance on tax-free pension savings, which originally stood at £1 million. The energy price guarantee will remain in place for a further 3 months, meaning the average household will pay £2,500 a year, and around 4 million customers on prepayment meters will now also pay the same as those on direct debits. And he also announced an increase to the defence budget worth £11 billion. That's over the next 5 years. And in a major shake-up of childcare, Jeremy Hunt unveiled every child over the age of 9 months is eligible for 30 hours of free childcare.
I don't want any parent with a child under 5 to be prevented from working if they want to, because it's damaging to our economy and unfair mainly to women. In eligible households where all adults are working at least 16 hours, we will introduce 30 hours of free childcare, not just for 3- and 4-year-olds, but for every single child over the age of 9 months. Yeah! It's a package worth, on average, £6,500 every year and reduces their childcare costs by nearly 60%.
Well, in response to that, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said the budget was dressing up stagnation as stability.
His opening boast was that things aren't quite as bad now as they were in October last year after the kamikaze budget. Yeah. And the more that he pretends everything is fine, the more he shows just how out of touch they are. Yeah. After 13 years of his government, our economy needed major surgery. But like millions across our country, this budget leaves us stuck in the waiting room with only a sticking plaster to hand.
And also in response to the spring budget, union leaders criticised the Chancellor for failing to tackle ongoing strikes across the country, and that as thousands of teachers, junior doctors, tube drivers in London and BBC journalists were taking industrial action over issues including pay, jobs, pensions and conditions. Unite's General Secretary says Jeremy Hunt didn't prioritise saving the NHS and instead delivered a historic betrayal. Now, in other news today, 3 men have been arrested after a drive-by shooting outside a church in London in January. One of them, 19-year-old Alrico Nelson Martin, have been charged with possessing a shotgun with intent to endanger life and 6 other counts of intent. The 2 other men have been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. They remain in custody. 4 women and 2 girls aged 11 and 7 were injured in the incident. A 48-year-old is still undergoing treatment in hospital. That's the latest from the GB Newsroom. We're back in half an hour. See you then.
Right, OK, so fuel duty, that's been frozen. Beer duty will be cut and energy bills remain capped in Jeremy Hunt's hotly anticipated budget as he attempts to help families feeling the pinch. Now, the extension of the energy price guarantee will shave £160 off a typical home's energy bills, whilst vulnerable households on prepayment meters will no longer pay through the nose for their heating, or hopefully have British Gas kick the door in and supply you one without you knowing anyway. But none of this appeared to warm Keir Starmer's heart across the dispatch box as the Labour leader accused Jeremy Hunt of making working people pay for the Tory choices and Tory mistakes. Let's get some response now from the Liberal Democrats, and joining me is their deputy leader, is Daisy Cooper. Daisy, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. OK, so what are your criticisms then of Jeremy Hunt's budget?
Well, to be honest, I think the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are just so out of touch, they might as well be living on another planet. Not only is the economy flatlining, but we are still experiencing the worst living standards, the biggest drop in living standards on record. But let's be clear about people's energy bills. They're going to go up, not go down, because the government could have reduced people's energy bills, but they refused to do that. And of course, they're scrapping the £400 rebate. So actually, people are going to feel a real hit in their pockets. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor had a real opportunity to show that they understand how the cost of living is impacting on people and families and pensioners around the country, and they completely failed to do that.
Is what you've said true there? Because we've just had a prediction, haven't we, of growth of 1.8%, 2.5%, 2.1% and 1.9% over the next 4 years. That means the economy's not flatlining. We were the fastest growing economy in the G7 last year. I've got to ask you respectfully, you said that Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak looked out of touch. I just wonder whether or not you guys look like you're revelling in fake misery.
No, not at all. I mean, if you look around the country, and certainly when I have my constituency surgeries, there are people who are facing real misery at the moment. People are terrified about putting the heating on. People are having to go to food banks because they can't put food on their tables. People are finding it incredibly difficult at the moment. There's nothing fake about the misery that millions of people are facing up and down the country as a result of the way that the Conservatives have been running the economy. The fact is that, as I say, there will be no extension of the rebate. Liberal Democrats had called for the government to actually try and cut energy bills rather than just freeze the energy price guarantee. We said that could have been paid for because energy prices are coming down faster than the government had expected. So they'd already put money to one side, and we said they should have used that to bring prices down. As it stands, in the coming year, people's energy prices and energy bills will still be twice of what they were in 2021, and that's going to feel really tough in people's pockets around the country.
OK, childcare, though, the Tories are claiming that's a big win, a good win for new parents. Apparently, children aged 1 and 2 will have 30 hours of free childcare. Do you back that?
Well, let's be clear, on childcare, the content is pretty good because they've effectively copied and pasted everything the Liberal Democrats said in our 2019 general election manifesto, but the timing is incredibly cynical. The fact is they're not even going to introduce some of the most basic measures until April next year, and most of them will take much longer, which means that actually it may well be after the next general election, and the government may not even be the ones in charge to put that in place. So let's be clear, there is nothing the government is introducing immediately. They're kicking it into the long grass. So the content, of course, that's great. They've copied it mostly from the Lib Dem manifesto, but the timing is incredibly cynical. OK, all right, look, I'm just going to return very quickly, if that's all right, Daisy, to something that you said earlier on about essentially who's out of touch. And look, I suppose, unfortunately for you and the Lib Dems, there's new polling that's dropped on the illegal migration bill, which shows that 52% of people do want to remove illegal immigrants and block them from returning. Just 16% of the population would strongly disagree with the illegal migration bill. And a new poll from Redfield and Wilton as well shows that there is just 1 point of difference now between Keir Starmer, I know he's not your party, and Rishi Sunak when it comes to the popularity poll. So when it comes to people being out of touch, with respect, the Tories are doing all right at the minute. Well, I mean, Liberal Democrats, if you look at the way we've been performing in actual elections, we've been doing pretty well as well. As you know, we had 3 stunning by-election wins in Buckinghamshire and in North Shropshire and down in Devon. We were winning over voters who hadn't ever voted Liberal Democrat before, lifelong Conservative voters who were sick to the back teeth of the way that the government is running the economy, creating the cost of living crisis and running our NHS into the ground. And at the set of local elections last year, we did pretty well as well. So when you look at real elections and real results, I'd say we're doing all right. Good stuff, Daisy. Look, thank you very much. Always enjoy our back and forth. Hope to speak to you again very soon. Daisy Cooper there, who's Deputy Leader of the Lib Dems. I'm going to whiz it over now to a Tory backbencher. What do they make of Jeremy Hunt's budget? There are rumours that, well, not rumours, it's true, really, that one of the main points of opposition to this budget could come from Tory backbenchers. And Conservative MP for Newbury, Laura Farris, joins me now. Yes, there we go. Laura, good stuff. Thank you very much. What do you make of this budget?
Well, I'm not going to be one of the complaining backbenchers. I was lobbying hard on the childcare stuff, actually. I went to see Jeremy about it a couple of times. I wrote a proposal for him with other MPs. I think one of them's just been on GBNews this afternoon. So I have to say I'm very, very pleased with what's been announced on childcare and other stuff as well.
People are saying it's not very conservative, though, Laura, because your average common man and woman on the street is still going to be taxed at higher heaven. What about small businesses? We are a nation of shopkeepers, aren't we? Well, you can't be in this country at the minute under a Tory government.
Well, I thought one of the things that he said that was most effective was what he said about capital investment. Any company that spends money on new plant, new kit, new IT can deduct the cost of that 100% from their tax bill. And if stimulating capital investment isn't pro-growth, then I don't know what is.
Well, you talk to me about pro-growth. People, certainly around my age, we want building, we want houses, we want the opportunity to actually live somewhere. Didn't hear much about that in the budget. What's going on there?
Well, look, you didn't hear much about that, but that message has been received loud and clear. I'm not much older than you, and I completely appreciate the need for more houses. I suppose I wouldn't necessarily have expected that to be in the budget, probably something that the Secretary of State for Housing would take, but don't worry, those requests and those very legitimate concerns are reaching the top of government.
Look, there was a noticeable lack of vigour, you could say, from the opposition benches today. I don't think Labour Party have really got a huge amount to get stuck into about this budget. One area that they are going to, though, is probably about the pensions. And they are saying that what the Tories have done here is preserve the pensions of the already most wealthy people in society. And it's that old you love the rich stuff, isn't it? How do you respond to that?
Well, I think that is a very reductive argument that is a reflection of the fact that Labour had very little to say. And I thought one of the most telling things, actually, if I could just go back to your previous guest, your previous guest from the Liberal Democrats could only point out weaknesses in the Conservatives by references to by-elections which were fought when we had a previous leader in place, when there was a previous Prime Minister. She couldn't find a single thing to criticise Rishi Sunak for.
Well, to be fair, Laura, let me just come on that. Sorry, but just quickly on that. What she actually was criticising as well, which is a point I would like to come back on, is the length of time it might take for this childcare boost to come in on. So so go on. I can see you're itching to get involved.
Firstly, on the pensions, I don't think many people would recognise an established GP, yes, as a sort of middle class professional, but I don't think that's the super rich, and I think it's I think it's a mischaracterisation to say otherwise. Don't forget that the pension lifetime allowance used to be 1.8 million. It was George Osborne that reduced it when we were going through some economic strife about 10 years ago. So actually, it's been stuck at 1 million for I don't know for exactly how many years, but it was brought down from a higher level before. So actually, it's just getting it back to where it was. Remember, pensions grow if they're well invested, so you don't need to be putting in.
Oh, I think we might have lost Laura. Oh, we've lost Laura. Oh, that's a shame. Anyway, I think we got the gist, didn't we? Laura Farris MP there, Conservative MP for Newbury. OK, so a range of views at the top there. We had a Lib Dem, Deputy Leader of the Lib Dems on, saying the real point of criticism there, really, was that the childcare stuff didn't come into force quickly enough. So that seemed to be what I gleaned from that. Laura, of course, pretty pro-budget, maybe quietening some things there, some ideas that there's going to be a huge amount of revolt and rebellion from the Conservative backbenches. I am joined now by the fabulously named Derek Licorice, MBE, who is a member of the National Energy Actions President's Group, who joins me. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So when it comes to the energy price cap, etc., do you think it's good, or does it leave a bad taste in your mouth?
Well, I've got two views. There's some good news and there's some bad news. And the good news is that the energy price cap has been extended for another 3 months. And of course, the heating season should, in theory, end at the end of March, but the chances are it will run into April and the heating will still be on. So bills will still be unaffordable for many, but at least the energy price cap has not gone up to £3,000, which would have been awful. Then I think, on terms of the bad news, is that we didn't hear anything about what will happen in the winter, because as we approach October, we anticipate that energy bills will still be around the £2,200 a year mark. And of course, customers have obviously got used to the energy bill support scheme, which gave them £67 a month for 6 months. So there's going to have to be some additional help for customers as we approach this winter, and some now. Back to the what I was pleased about was also to hear that the prepayment cost differential will no longer be there, and customers will be charged the same as direct debit. And whilst you're commenting me on being here as a member of the President's Group of National Energy Action, but I need to be clear, I'm also the non-executive chairman of Utilita, one of the energy companies, so I don't want people to be confused.
No, absolutely. Thank you for clearing that up, because you've almost as though we planned this, actually, which I think we quite clearly didn't. But I'm going to ask you about some of those utility companies now. No, I'm not. I'm going to ask you about the energy companies, actually, because when it comes to October is looming, I mean, it's almost like winter comes every year, isn't it? And people's bills go up. And taxpayers will be looking at this now and going, well, hang on a minute, are we just going to get clobbered again so that we can subsidise people's heating when we do have record profit levels from energy companies? I mean, at what point does the government have to turn around and go, look, put your hand in your pocket, because we can't clobber the taxpayer anymore?
Well, I understand the concern about the taxpayer being clobbered. I'm one of them, obviously. But the reality, as far as energy company profits are concerned, when is an energy company not an energy company in this context? Now, the energy retailers, and the one that I'm chairman of is Utilita. We, like many energy companies, are not making any margin at all on retailing gas and electricity to consumers. So I'm afraid this is pretty much a profit-free zone. What you're talking about, where the huge profits are being made, is upstream in the system. The people who drill for gas and that sort of thing. And there's also significant profits being made in terms of some generations. So the old renewable projects, they are making significant margins because they actually get paid for what it costs to generate gas electricity. Now, I know the government's is looking at correcting that. So I'm afraid the taxpayer is going to have to be on the hook for what's going to happen for next winter.
The problem is, though, I get it, but I'm looking at this budget now, you know, and the taxpayer's on the hook for raising people's kids. The taxpayer's going to be on the hook for, although it wasn't in this budget, but the inevitable, albeit possibly marginal public sector pay rises that we're going to see. The taxpayer's on the hook for all sorts, everything, left, right, centre, from whether or not you own a small business to whether or not you just give birth, OK? And, you know, now we're going to have to be on the hook for energy bills as well. I mean, should we just sack it all off and just say, right, you know what, let's have radical socialism?
I understand that can be a conclusion that some people will draw, but we are in an unprecedented period as far as the costs of energy are concerned. I do think that they will resolve themselves in time, but by then, in a society such as ours, where we have to be fair to all, and particularly the elderly, the vulnerable, those that are sick, we need to help those people as a caring society, whether you're a caring Liberal, a caring Labour politician, or a caring Conservative one. That's what we should be doing. And so, yes, but what is for sure is that what the government originally planned to spend on the energy price guarantee is a fraction of what they originally thought it would be. But I understand it all goes back to the taxpayer at the end of the day. That's where all this comes from, and I can understand why there is some concern.
All right, look, lovely stuff. Thank you very much. Great to chat, and I will talk to you again very soon, no doubt. Derek Lickorish there, MBE, National Energy Action's President's Group, and I think a company called Utilita as well. Why not? With me now, though, is Matthew Lesh, who is the Head of Public Policy at the Institute for Economic Affairs. Good stuff, Matthew. Great to see you. OK, so look, what stood out for this budget for you? Because, let's be honest, the IEA pretty much bang in favour of what Liz Truss said. Not entirely, but largely bang in favour of what Liz Truss said. That was a big, walloping, go-for-growth budget, which actually resulted in her going home, and that home wasn't Downing Street anymore. So what do you make of this?
Look, I think this is very much a steady as she goes budget, and unfortunately it's just simply not going to deliver the kind of reforms that are necessary to jumpstart the economy. Now, I think we should give the government credit where credit's due. There are some very positive parts of this. The introduction of full expensing will encourage business investment. The recognition of foreign medicines could very much be the kind of deregulation that saves lives. The changes to pension rules could very much encourage people to work. But overall, the picture is pretty grim here. We've got a situation where the government is maintaining some of the highest level of spending and taxes outside of wartime in British history. You've got a situation where the government's just spending tens of billions more. They're not doing the kind of reforms, be it to tax or to regulation, that could really deliver huge levels of economic growth that are necessary for the economy. And considering the fact that we've had such low levels of growth for the last decade, we need to see far more if we're going to have a truly growth budget.
Yes. Now, look, there will be new parents or people thinking about having kids who think, great, OK, 30 hours a week, free childcare, fantastic, great stuff. There will be people, you know, pensioners, for example, with a decent pension who might now stay and work if they want to as a result of this. Again, that's great. But actually, I can't help but feel as though there is a lack of ambition when it comes to things like building, so physical growth in that sense, and also unleashing the shackles of taxation and corporation tax, etc., on the UK. And are the younger generation, I say this with my eyes wide open, are the younger generation the big losers in this budget, really?
Well, I think that's true. I think the younger generation have a longer-term, pretty bleak picture when it comes to some of the situations, be it something like being able to buy a home, be it the kind of economic growth we can expect in future. I mean, we have this underlying issue here, which is we have an ageing population, increasing burdens on healthcare, increasing burdens on things like aged care, and as a result, you're going to see the people who are working see more burdens. Now, in order to respond to that, we need to get more productive. We need to be able to boost our incomes so that we can take care of the elderly at the same time. We need to improve public services so that we're not spending record amounts on the NHS while getting less and worse.
Well, exactly, yes. And just a quick one with you, if that's all right, because I want to hit home a bit on the growth figures. And Labour have been accused of spreading fake news earlier on about the growth and the bleak economic picture. I personally, from just what I was looking at, thought that it was frankly bad news for the Labour Party that Britain was doing well, and they didn't bother to try to hide that they thought that was bad news, which I think raises serious questions about what their priorities are. But we are going to avoid a technical recession. The growth forecast for the next 4 years, 1.8%, 2.5%, 2.1%, 1.9%. And despite what you may read online, we were the fastest growing economy in the G7 last year. And these are reasons to be cheerful, are they not? Did we need a steady-as-she-goes budget from a very, very dull man?
I mean, on the economic growth question, very much some of the forecasts are looking like they were inaccurate. The news is slightly better, at least in the next few years, than was expected. I think this really just says a lot about not being too overly dependent on forecasts. But the OBR has a pretty long history of not getting these kind of figures particularly right. And if they say something very bad is going to happen, maybe something slightly better will happen. Or if they say things are going to be great, things might not necessarily be that great. Economic forecasting is a very imprecise business, to say the least, and we shouldn't put too much political stock into it. And I think some of the graphics that have been going around from some political figures using some of these forecasts to make big claims about the British economy aren't that accurate. As you've said, when the actual facts come in, things aren't necessarily that bad.
Matthew Lesh there, looking incredibly dapper as well. A nice treat for our television viewers. Matthew Lesh there is the Head of Public Policy at the Institute for Economic Affairs. Great stuff. Right, loads of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on today's budget. Sadie's been on. This budget is the most uninspired budget, grief. All well and good sorting childcare and pensions, but if taxpayers and businesses don't get tax cuts, it won't move the economy. And this is a massive point. You are absolutely right. And, you know, the childcare thing has proved possibly more controversial than I thought it was when I came on air, thanks to a lot of your emails. Remarkably as well, from women, from mothers, who are saying one of two things, which is that they would quite like the government to be encouraging mums to stay home and look after the kids themselves. That's just a common view in the inbox. I'm not saying that's the national perspective. And also the fact that the taxpayers don't want to pay necessarily for people to have kids that they can't afford themselves. Controversial views, but I'm getting a lot of that nonetheless. And yes, if your average man and woman on the street isn't going to feel any better off as a result of this budget, then realistically, is it going to be that popular? We will have to wait and see. Bev says the government is not there to, here we go, not there to look after kids. People should not have kids if they can't afford them. Right on cue there, Bev. You love to see it. And one more. Lisa says, as an over 50 who became unemployed on Monday, oh gosh, I'm looking forward to hearing how Jeremy is going to help me get a new job. Usually any help available is means tested, so I never get any. That's a good point. I'm looking forward to a few pints of cheaper real ale there. Well, at least you're quite literally a glass half full person, Lisa, and all the best to you. Good luck to you. But yes, hopefully you can get yourself back on your feet. Look, thank you very much, everybody who's been getting in touch. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Has the Chancellor done enough to convince his own MPs, as well as the tens of thousands of public sector workers who are out on strike today? I am Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Well, Jeremy Hunt's spring budget isn't the only big event in Westminster today, as tens of thousands of striking workers are out in force once again in the biggest walkout since the current wave of strikes began last year. We've got junior doctors, teachers, tube drivers, lecturers, civil servants and apparently some people from the BBC. And they're taking industrial action deliberately on budget day to call for massive public sector pay increases. Is this the general strike that many have foretold? It's a shame Keir Starmer didn't pick up on it, is it? Because you've got a load of his voters outside Parliament shouting and screaming at him, and he decided to talk about Gary Lineker at PMQs. So, you know, there we go. Anyway, with me now is Olivia Rutley, GB News' political reporter. Olivia, don't worry, I will keep it on topic and not veer off about a millionaire football presenter. What's going on with all these workers out on strike?
Yes, so I'm here in Westminster where I can see plenty of picket lines. Civil servants, for example, are just round the corner from here striking. It's thought that up to 400,000 workers are striking today, which would be the biggest strike action for a decade. Now, the biggest two problems really for the government are the teachers' strike and the junior doctors' strike. The junior doctors' strike is now into its third and final day. But what junior doctors are calling for is a 35% pay increase. They say that after inflation's been taken into account, their pay has been cut by 26% since 2008, and they want to see a corrective pay rise. Now, obviously, the government is saying that that is incompatible with the desire to cut inflation by half. They think that would be incredibly inflationary, and so the talks continue, but without much progress. The teachers' strike is also a massive issue for the government. We know that children across the country are still struggling to catch up with the effect of their education from successive lockdowns, and we're now seeing another teacher strike. And one big issue with the teacher strike is that under striking laws, Teachers who aren't even members of unions are allowed to go on strike, to join their striking colleagues on picket lines, and they don't even have to tell their school whether they're turning up or not. So today we've seen GCSE and A-level pupils who we were told weren't going to see any impact on their education, not having the lessons which we were expecting them to have today. And there doesn't seem to be any budging in terms of the talks. What teachers are asking for is an inflation-busting pay rise, that's over 10%. But they were given a 5% pay rise last year, and the government seems to think that that's enough. Strikers will not be happy with what came out of the budget. There was no mention of public sector pay at all.
No.
Jeremy Hunt is sticking with his line that to cut inflation, we have to keep public sector pay where it is.
Yeah, I can't help but wonder whether or not they feel remarkably unrepresented in the House of Commons today. No mention of them in the budget, no mention of them at PMQs from the actual leader of the opposition, of course, Keir Starmer. But there we go. Thank you very much. Olivia Utley there, GB News' political reporter. We're now whizzing you over to Downing Street. At least that's where he was last time. He's still there. Darren McCaffrey, GB News' political editor. Good stuff. OK, so the political fallout or otherwise from this, I mean, we were expecting maybe a little bit more from the Conservative backbenchers, weren't we? I mean, they don't seem particularly happy about your average common man and woman on the street being taxed to high heaven. What's your view or take?
Yeah, indeed, and that could well come, Patrick. Let's remember that, yeah, there is good news today, in essence, that we're not likely to go into a technical recession, though we are not likely to see much economic growth this year at all, far from it. So the news is still bad, but not quite as bad as in the aftermath of that mini budget. But you know what, if you listen to the OBR, what they're actually saying is that lots of economic growth is actually going to come from higher migration in the years to come. They're expecting migration actually to continue to grow in the next 3, 4, 5 years or so, and that's going to be a big driver of economic growth. Now, even at PMQs today, there's a question from Conservative backbencher talking about how they do not want to see immigration increase. They want to see the upskill of workers here, so that's one potential point of tension. And then the second thing is that as a percentage share of GDP, the tax intake for the government is going to still hit record high levels. So what I'm trying to say is, and that's because, again, millions of people in the next month, and you, I, and everyone else will notice this in our tax packets in April, is that lots of people are going to get sucked into higher rates of income tax simply because the thresholds are frozen, and that is leading even further to a squeeze on living standards. What I'm trying to say here, Patrick, is that on those 2 points, the Conservative right, those that back Liz Truss, those that have been saying that to be a proper Conservative you need lower taxes and economic growth, might not be terribly happy actually with this budget. Now, they are pretty muted to date, but what tends to happen with budgets is that as the information trickles out, as you read the small print, more and more people get annoyed. Now, one of the reasons they also might be muted is that in the end, actually this was a pretty steady-as-you-go budget. The idea that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt wanted to pursue in this budget is really not to do very much. They're very, very much scarred by that mini budget back in September of last year. They don't want to rock the boat, and that's why some would accuse them today of, despite the measures on pensions and childcare, of effectively tinkering around the edges.
Tinkering around the edges. Darren, thank you very, very much. Darren McCaffrey there, GB News' political editor. Right, OK, there's loads more to come between now and 5 o'clock. So, what does Labour think about all this? I will get their reaction from a senior shadow cabinet spokesperson. I can't wait for that. And my bank account's gone up in smoke. That's right. Jeremy Hunt's raised the price of fags by more than £1 a pack. Should he just butt out of my bank balance? Anyway, I've got all of that covered your way and much more after your headlines with Polly.
Thanks very much indeed, Patrick. The top stories on GB News. Jeremy Hunt has announced the first budget as Chancellor, vowing to encourage millions to rejoin the workforce and boost the UK's financial growth. The Chancellor says the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, now forecast the UK will no longer enter a recession this year. It says inflation is predicted as well to fall from 10.7% at the end of last year to 2.9% by the end of 2023. Well, Labour's reaction was that they accused the government of a managed decline of the country, describing the budget as a sticking plaster. Here are the main points on today's spring budget. The Chancellor announcing a change in duty on draft products sold in pubs, allowing them to be 11 pence lower than supermarkets. The Treasury also freezing fuel duty for a further 12 months. There's also a move to abolish the lifetime allowance on tax-free pension savings, which originally stood at £1 million. The energy price guarantee will remain in place for another 3 months, meaning the average household will pay £2,500 a year, and 4 million customers on prepayment meters will now also pay the same as those on direct debits. He's also announced an increase to the defence budget worth £11 billion over the next 5 years. And in a major shake-up on childcare, Jeremy Hunt unveiled every child over the age of 9 months is now eligible for 30 hours of free care. And all that coming as union leaders criticise the Chancellor's budget for failing to tackle ongoing strikes across the country. That's as thousands of teachers, junior doctors, tube drivers and BBC journalists took industrial action over issues including pay, jobs and conditions. Unite's General Secretary said the Chancellor didn't prioritise the NHS, instead delivering a historic betrayal. Now, the Defence Secretary, in separate news, says Moscow should respect international airspace after Russian jets collided with an American Reaper drone over the Black Sea yesterday. Ben Wallace said America has called the incident unprofessional, with the White House accusing Russia of recklessly colliding with its drone. It raises fears of an escalation between the two superpowers, with Russia calling the move a provocation. Those are your latest news headlines. We're back at 5 with more. See you then.
OK, people, welcome back. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on a whole variety of different things, all budget-focused, I must say, different elements to it. Stuart says, I don't know about draft relief on beer. Where was the draft relief on home insulation products? OK, fair enough. Elizabeth says, what on earth is the point of giving people subsidies on their energy bills if half of those bills are made up by 4 different taxes? Why on earth are we paying VAT when we've left the EU with no VAT and 12% corporation tax? We really would get growth. Hunt's way, we are going to get bankruptcies. I mean, look, there is this argument, isn't there, that we were so scarred, wrongly in my opinion, but so scarred by Liz Truss's initial fiscal incident, I suppose you could say, that now we're not going far enough in this and we're being overly cautious. I know our economics and business editor Liam Halligan feels very strongly about that. Sue says, we undervalue the importance for family stability, the stresses and pressures of juggling kids, 2 jobs and everyday life. We need 2 wages just to survive. So this is on the childcare announcements. Years ago, we had less materially, but emotionally our lives were kinder, more stable, and it let us enjoy our childhood and our children. Now, this is a fascinating thing. This is definitely a trend in the inbox, and it was one that I wasn't, probably wrongly, I wasn't expecting, actually. A lot of women getting in touch on the childcare announcement that there are going to be 30 hours free childcare for children aged 1 and 2, saying that actually they don't like this. A, don't particularly like the idea of the taxpayer paying for other people's kids. B, there's that old thing about don't have kids that you can't afford, which is possibly a bit unfair, but maybe not. And also the idea that we should maybe, this is the views of quite a few people who've been getting in touch with me, but you're doing more to try to prioritise mums being able to, sounds like a traditional view, this being able to stay at home and raise the kids themselves, etc. So there you go. There is a lot of that coming in. Keep your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Another big one in this budget today was about pensioners. Now, Carol says, I'm a pensioner, nothing for me. I get no concessions, over 50. Why should you go back to work if you don't claim benefits? Lots of those babysit their grandchildren so their kids don't have to pay for the childcare, etc. Yes, OK, now I understand that. I'm very sympathetic towards it. The criticism that is really clamouring across the chamber in the Commons earlier on from Labour was about, oh, well, the pensions announcements, it's helping the richest people, they say, it's helping the richest people. What the Conservatives are trying to do is incentivise people to either get back into work or to stay in work, essentially. And they're doing this by abolishing the lifetime pension allowance, the effort to keep people in work for longer. The argument against that would be, as in against what the Labour Party is saying, would be, well, actually, the Tories are trying to bracket it as they're helping the NHS because it helps keep consultants in there, etc. So it's very much a mixed bag. We're going to get stuck into all of this. Coming up, though, we are going to talk about the price of fags. That's right. And we will hear from a Labour spokesperson on today's budget announcement. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview channel 236.
And YouView channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Jeremy Hunt announced that the UK will not, I repeat, not enter recession this year, according to forecasting. But Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer criticised the low growth predictions, posing the question to the opposition benches if working people could really say they were better off after 13 years under Conservative rule. But are the Chancellor's measures just more sticking plaster politics? Or has Jeremy Hunt put our economy back onto a steady and safe path? Well, let's hear now from the opposition, because joining me is James Murray MP, Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. Great stuff. Great to have you on the show. Thank you very, very much. Why has Labour been accused of spreading fake news about economic doom and gloom when we've got growth figures predicted at 1.8%, 2.5%, 2.1%, 1.9%, and we were the fastest growing economy in the G7 last year? Are you just trying to spread misery for political gain?
Look, if you want to know what's happening with the economy, you just have to look at what the Office of Budget Responsibility has said alongside the budget today. And they've confirmed the growth forecast has been revised downward today alongside the budget. And if you look over the longer term, this is not just about 1 year or 2 years worth of economic data. This is also about looking what's happened over the last 13 years. And real wages have fallen since 2010 and the decade that followed. And we know that we're in a worse off position now than we have been under the Labour government before. And I think what the government really needed to do today was to set out a credible plan for growth, and that's what they failed to do.
OK, you say that they've failed to set out a credible plan for growth. I mean, a lot of people would say that it's a great thing that what they've done with the pensions. They are obviously trying to keep people in work for longer. I mean, is Labour opposed to that?
Well, look, we need to make sure when we're spending public money that it's value for money and that it achieves the aim that we set out to achieve. And, actually, the only permanent tax cut we saw in the budget today was this tax cut aimed at the top 1% of earners through the pension pot changes. That's the only permanent tax cut which they set out.
Just to pick up on that, then, sorry,
is it value for money? And some of the, but let me just say, you asked about,
no, I need to pick up on that because
£70,000 being spent per person getting back into work.
I've got to push back on that because I thought that the Labour Party really cared about the NHS. I thought that was your baby and you wanted to see it blossom. But the Conservatives are indeed trying to make sure that people who work in the NHS can stay working in the NHS longer. So if you're criticising what you're saying about the pensions only benefiting the wealthiest people, I mean, it's designed to help the NHS. So have you guys stopped caring about that?
Well, look, we know that there's a particular issue with doctors' pensions, and that's something which, I know and other MPs know from our constituents who are doctors, often getting in touch with us to talk about those problems. And, we've said that that needed to be addressed. But the truth is that this is a tax cut, this is a handout which is handed towards the top 1%. But actually, look, you asked about the NHS. We were setting out in the run-up to the budget what the government should do is scrap the non-dom tax loophole and use some of the money saved by scrapping that non-dom tax loophole to fund an NHS workforce expansion plan. That would be really transformational for the NHS. So we care desperately about the NHS, as do people across the UK. And if we really want to get the NHS back on its feet, it needs a proper plan for its workforce, which must involve scrapping the non-dom status and using some of that money to increase the NHS workforce.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit like playing Labour Party bingo at the minute because bringing up the non-doms, again, does make it sound potentially a little bit like you don't really like a lot of wealthy people. Again, I would just push back a bit on the pensions benefits, as it were, for the top 1%. I mean, these are people who have paid these are people who have paid more tax than anyone else for their entire working lives. I mean, why should they be made to suffer again in their retirement?
No, look, can I... You asked about our approach to taxation, and our approach to taxation is one of fairness. It's about everyone paying their fair share. And what we said is unfair about the non-dom tax loophole is it means that people who have a lot of wealth overseas don't pay their fair share of tax. Now, we're saying that loophole should be closed. This is about fairness. This is not about targeting any particular group. It's about making sure that everyone pays their fair share. And if we close that loophole, we could then invest in the NHS workforce, which would benefit everyone across the UK.
If you cared so much about people working in the NHS and public sector jobs, why on earth did Keir Starmer spend half an hour talking about Gary Lineker at Prime Minister's Questions?
Well, look, that's a really important issue about free speech, about
more important than tens of thousands of people outside shouting at you. Public sector workers.
It's one of these situations where you have Prime Minister's Questions immediately before the budget debate, and so I think probably Keir and others knew that a lot of the issues around the economy were going to be picked up in the budget debate that followed. But the issue about the BBC and how we think about that institution and the freedom of speech that people who work on the BBC have, those are important issues, for public discourse about important issues of the day. But as I said, you had PMQs, but it was followed by the budget debate, and the budget debate is where issues around the economy were focused on in great detail.
Whilst Prime Minister's Question Time was taking place, there were tens of thousands, according to some reports, hundreds of thousands of public sector workers shouting at that building that you're stood in front of there, clamouring about public sector pay rises. And Keir Starmer will have known that Jeremy Hunt was not going to pull a massive rabbit out of the hat when it comes to public sector pay. And he still chose to go in on millionaire footballer Gary Lineker. Would you have done that?
Well, look, I don't get to pick the questions for Prime Minister's Questions, but Keir has made a point of raising an issue which has been talked about by a lot of people across the country in the last few days. And if you're talking about making sure that people in different sectors of the economy get a fair deal at work and get fair pay, that's something Keir's talked about extensively as well. He's talked about the need for the government to get around the table with representatives of lots of different professions, teachers, but also railway workers and all the other industries where industrial action has happened or is threatened. And what Keir has said throughout is that the government should get around the table, have those discussions with workers' representatives, with the trade unions, and come up with deals that help to avoid strikes going ahead.
OK, look, just one more very quick one on the illegal migration bill as well. The latest polls show that 52% of the public apparently back the decision to remove illegal immigrants and block them from returning. Just 16% of people strongly disagree with that. Is the Labour Party in recession in terms of the popularity stakes on this?
No, I think the issue with small boats crossing the channel is one that people across the UK know something needs to be done about. I think what the big division is in Parliament, though, what the big debate is about, is how we approach that. And we think the government's approach is driven by gimmick, by headline, by plans that won't really work or have the effect, and in some cases might even be counterproductive. Whereas what we set out is that we would target money to go after those smuggler gangs, to go after the people traffickers, to make sure that fewer small boats are crossing in the first place, and so that people don't spend months in limbo in hotels without any return agreements in place internationally.
Good stuff. Look, James, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate your time, honestly. I do always enjoy our back and forth. That's James Murray there, MP, Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury. Great stuff. It's quite a slick operator, isn't it, to say the least? Anyway, right, let's get the reaction now from Cardiff Market, yes, where our national reporter, Paul Hawkins, has been talking to shoppers and stall holders. There we go. Paul, good stuff, yes. What's it like at the market?
The shutters are coming down, it shuts at 5, so it's winding down here today. But we've been here all day talking to the traders and to the shoppers. And in terms of those measures announced by Jeremy Hunt that directly affect people's lives in a much more immediate way than the big funding announcements, the freeze in duty on draft beer, that's been warmly welcomed. Also the freeze in duty on fuel as well, that's been warmly welcomed by a lot of people here. In terms of what it means for Wales, this budget, £180 million in extra funding for the Welsh Government. They don't have to follow the Westminster government's policies, of course. They can choose to do with that money what they want. The Childcare announcement made by Jeremy Hunt today, that only applies to England. Now, in Wales at the moment, if you have a 3 or a 4-year-old, you can get 30 weeks of funding per week, 30 hours, I should say, per week funding. And that they're looking at extending that to all 2-year-olds. Some 2-year-olds do get it who are from low-income families, but there will be pressure on the Welsh Government to take some of that £180 million that's been allocated to Wales today and to use that for childcare funding. The Welsh Labour Government already coming under pressure from Plaid and the Welsh Conservatives on that one. In terms of other announcements today, one of those 12 investment zones will come to Wales, so that's an extra £80 million worth of funding over 5 years for that investment zone. Again, the Welsh Government will probably have a say on where that ends up in Wales. And then the Holyhead breakwater as well, which is basically a seawall that protects Holyhead in Anglesey. It's about 150 years old. They've announced £20 million worth of funding today to shore up the seawall that protects Holyhead. But in terms of the day-to-day assistance with people's lives here, yes, the energy bill help, the extension of that help has been warmly welcomed. Also, the announcements on beer and on fuel duty have been warmly welcomed. But businesses are saying, definitely speaking to people here, they're disappointed that there aren't more tax cuts and that there isn't more assistance for small businesses, certainly in terms of grants. So there'll be a little bit of pressure on the Welsh Labour Government to maybe dig into that £180 million and try and help businesses out where they can there.
Lovely stuff, Paul. Thank you very, very much. Paul Hawkins, our national reporter from a market in Cardiff, known as Cardiff Market. I wonder how they came up with that name. Anyway, right, it's been a bad day. It's been a bad day for smokers, ladies and gentlemen. It's really put a downer on my day, let me tell you that much. But smokers are going to be paying more for their cigarettes as the Chancellor announced tobacco duty will rise. Let's get stuck into the details of how the government are trying to meddle in the simple pleasures of life. And the tax on cigarettes is rising in line with the retail price index measure of inflation, which currently stands at 12.7%, plus an extra 2% is applied to tobacco products in the UK. So, what does all of this really mean? Well, it means the average price of a pack of 20 fags will go up by around £1.75 to nearly £15. And rolling tobacco, which no doubt I will have to get involved with very shortly, will also increase by the RPI plus 6%. And these increases come into force from 6 p.m. this evening. So bearing in mind I come off air at 6 p.m. this evening, and this was announced whilst I was in the office, so I've had no chance to do anything about it. Well, we went out and we asked the people if the price increase was going to make them give up the habit.
As if you're not getting enough money. Oh, I don't know. I'm going to stop.
You're going to stop? That's going to make you stop smoking?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I mean, that's nearly £12 a packet. Absolutely shocking.
Probably not. £1 probably is not going to make all the difference in the world, but still, yeah, unfortunate.
To be honest with you, I don't always buy cigarettes because they're just too expensive. But yeah, it's not going to make me give up. No, it's an addiction.
I'm joined now by Christopher Snowdon, who is the head of Lifestyle Economics Institute of Economic Affairs. And Christopher, what do you make of this? Do you think people are trying to be priced out of the simple pleasures of life, or is this a good thing? I'm aware that we might not have audio. Oh, Chris, I'm sorry about this. Chris, I'm sorry. We're going to have to come back to you, I'm afraid. Apologies. Stay where you are, Chris. We'll get your audio sorted. And there we go. OK, all right, fair enough. We are basically out of time anyway. The Chancellor unveiled his budget today, though, of course, as we have not stopped talking about. And just to get stuck into the smaller, finer points of that and recap some of the measures, I believe we've got Jasmine Birtles. There we go. Jasmine Birtles, who's a personal finance expert and the founder of MoneyMagpie.com. Jasmine, yes, I mean, look, smokers, bad news for them, but good news for other people, I suppose, people who have got kids and younger kids anyway, who are looking to get some childcare support, etc. Just run us through your highs and lows, the winners and losers of this big budget.
Well, I think some of the big winners, of course, are the very rich, the ones on really good earnings. It did make me laugh that Jeremy Hunt promoted it as, doctors, we want to get more doctors. It's rich people, basically rich people will be able to put as much as they like, pretty much, into their pension pots, up to £60,000 a year, but after that, it's a complete, limitless pot. Also, parents, and again, he's aiming, he says, at getting more women back into the workforce. So parents are getting a lot more help with childcare, or it seems to be anyway. And he's also giving sweeteners to people who might have been thinking about going into childcare. I personally think that it would have been better simply to increase the rates at which the amounts that they're paid, because that's one of the main reasons why people don't go into childcare. It's not well paid. So they've done well. The rest of us have done well with the the extension of helping us with our fuel bills. That's being extended to the end of July, or to the end of June. So that's a help to us. However, I was deeply unimpressed at the corporation tax coming in, 25%. I think that is not going to help business. It won't help the economy. I think it'll encourage various businesses to go out of the country. I was not impressed that he didn't unfreeze the personal tax allowance. I was pleased that he didn't increase the fuel charge. I mean, that was an obvious, I think.
Look, Jasmine, thank you very, very much. Obviously, a little bit rushed here at the end. We had a lot to fit in. Jasmine Birtles, their personal finance expert and founder of MoneyMagpie.com. Right, look, loads to come. We're picking apart this budget right the way through, from pensions to smokers. Smokers have been clobbered. But anyway, it's time for a quick break. See you in a minute.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts of
Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of trousers?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Yes, welcome along, everybody. It's just gone 5 p.m. I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News. I'm with you for the next hour. Here's what's on the menu, people. Jeremy Hunt, yes, that's right. His rather large package was unveiled in the House of Commons earlier on. We're focusing on pensions at the top of this hour. Good news for some pensioners. Find out why in just a second. But, yes, there was rather a lot of shouting and hollering outside the House of Commons because tens of thousands of people, public sector workers, were on strike. We're going to find out exactly what they want. I mean, money, really, isn't it? But talking of money, yes, that's right, whole lot of money. The end of potholes, ladies and gentlemen. Around 200 million quid has been dished out to the highway so that you, the average motorist out there, will essentially not have your chassis ruined by a dodgy pothole. All of this coming your way and much, much more very shortly. Make sure you stay tuned. Yes, look, get your emails coming in, ladies and gents. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Massively mixed bag in the inbox about this budget so far. I'm just going to keep it general. Does this budget work for you? Are you a happy bunny? Are you a happy customer of Jeremy Hunt's Tory budget? gbviews@gbnews.uk. But right now, it's your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Well, let's look at this budget then. Jeremy Hunt has set out his plan for the British economy in his first budget as Chancellor, vowing to encourage millions to rejoin the workforce and boost Britain's financial growth. The Chancellor says the Office for Budget Responsibility now forecasts the UK will no longer enter a recession this year. It says the UK economy is on the right track, with inflation predicted to fall from 10.7% in the final quarter of last year to 2.9% by the end of 2023. Labour has accused the government of a managed decline of the country and said the budget was just a sticking plaster. Let's look at the detail then. In a speech lasting almost an hour, the Chancellor announced measures including a change in duty paid on draft products in pubs, meaning beers and ciders will be about 11 pence lower than they are in supermarkets, something he said was only possible post-Brexit. And the Treasury will also freeze fuel duty for a further 12 months. It will also abolish the lifetime allowance on tax-free pension savings, which originally stood at £1 million. The energy price guarantee will remain in place for a further 3 months, meaning the average household will pay £2,500 a year, and around 4 million customers on prepayment meters will now also pay the same as those on direct debits. In another move, the Chancellor announced an increase to the defence budget worth £11 billion over the next 5 years. And in a major shake-up on childcare, Jeremy Hunt said every child over the age of 9 months in eligible households would be offered 30 hours of free care.
I don't want any parent with a child under 5 to be prevented from working if they want to, because it's damaging to our economy and unfair mainly to women. In eligible households where all adults are working at least 16 hours, we will introduce 30 hours of free childcare, not just for 3- and 4-year-olds, but for every single child over the age of 9 months. Yeah! It's a package worth, on average, £6,500 every year and reduces their childcare costs by nearly 60%.
Well, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said the budget dressed up stagnation as stability.
His opening boast was that things aren't quite as bad now as they were in October last year after the kamikaze budget. And the more that he pretends everything is fine, the more he shows just how out of touch they are. After 13 years of his government, our economy needed major surgery. But like millions across our country, this budget leaves us stuck in the waiting room with only a sticking plaster to hand.
Well, union leaders criticised the Chancellor's budget for failing to tackle ongoing strikes across the country. Today, thousands of teachers, junior doctors, tube drivers and BBC journalists are all taking industrial action over issues including paid jobs and pensions. Unite's General Secretary says Jeremy Hunt didn't prioritise saving the NHS, instead delivering a historical betrayal. Now, 3 men have been arrested after a drive-by shooting outside a church in London in January. One of them, 19-year-old Alrico Nelson Martin, has been charged with possession of a shotgun with intent to endanger life and 6 other counts of intent. The 2 other men have been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. They remain in custody. 4 women and 2 girls aged 11 and 7 were injured in the incident. A 48-year-old is still undergoing treatment in hospital. Those are your latest news headlines. We're back at past with more. See you then.
Yes, we are unpicking one of the most anticipated budgets any Chancellor has delivered for a number of years. Jeremy from Accounts unveiled his financial plan, and it comes in the midst of a cost-of-living crisis, the ongoing war in Ukraine having a huge impact on the price of fuel and food. Well, today, the Chancellor set out how he intends to give Britain a boost with incentives to get parents back to the workplace and businesses to invest and innovate. He made a bold claim that his measures would see a drastic reduction in the rate of inflation. Well, you lucky people, I can treat you to our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, with more detail on what the Chancellor announced earlier today.
This was a steady-as-she-goes budget statement, a budget about not rocking the boat. It was a budget for growth, said Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, an economy proving the doubters wrong. And the economy certainly proved the Office for Budget Responsibility wrong, because the big economic picture, according to the OBR, is that the UK will avoid recession in 2023, a considerable improvement in the economic outlook. Inflation will be down from double digits now to 2.9% during the last 3 months of this year, a considerable easing in the cost of living crisis. Also helping households on energy fuel bills. The Chancellor maintained the price cap on household utilities, electricity and gas combined at £2,500 until June, rather than raising it to £3,000. That will save the average household £160, said the Chancellor. And for hard-pressed households, those using prepayment meters, which tend to be more expensive, additional charges on those will be abolished from July, said the Chancellor, a saving of £45 per year for 4 million cash-strapped families. Fuel and diesel duty was also frozen for the 13th year in a row, pleasing motorists, the 5p cut maintained, though fuel duty remains about 53p per litre, with VAT charged on top of that. Then when it came to drinks and cigarettes, duty on draft beer will be frozen, a change that will also be implemented in Northern Ireland after the Windsor framework, because Northern Ireland doesn't have to adhere to EU rules on that, and a packet of 20 cigarettes will go up steeply by about £1.75. A big economic announcement or non-announcement was that corporation tax will go up from 19 to 25%. That's the first rise in this profit tax since the early 1970s, the days of Labour's Dennis Healey. Offsetting that, though, the Chancellor said full expensing would be allowed for 3 years. That means companies, when they invest, can offset the cost of that investment against their corporation tax bill. An important announcement on nuclear power. The Chancellor saying atomic energy will now be classified as environmentally sustainable, meaning it qualifies for more subsidies. And there'll be more government support for the small modular reactors that can be rolled out quickly to be manufactured by Rolls-Royce and others. There was help with childcare. The Tories trying to appeal to young couples in particular. 30 hours a week of free childcare. That will be extended to 1- and 2-year-olds as well as 3- and 4-year-olds, as is currently the case. But because there aren't enough nurseries, that will have to be staged between now and 2025. Back to work. The Chancellor's main claim that this was a budget for growth is all about getting inactive people, making them more active. The disabled will be able to work for longer without losing benefits, and there'll be help for those over 50s, many of who left the workforce during the COVID pandemic, to get back to work, with skills boot camps and all the rest of it. The really big announcement: the Chancellor said that the annual tax-free limit on pension investments will be increased from £40,000 to £60,000, an unthinkably large amount of money for most households. And he said the lifetime allowance would be abolished on those pension savings, claiming that this would mean fewer NHS doctors retired early. In all, said the Chancellor, and in summary, we're following a plan and the plan is working. Labour retorted that the Tories are dressing up stagnation as stability as their expiry date looms closer. What we do know is that the economy, as always, will be the main battleground of the next general election, expected in mid-2024.
OK, well, there we go. An overview there of the budget announcement today from Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor. We can go live now, though, to our national reporter, Theo Chicomba, who is at a Chatty Chums lunch club in Gravesend. A bit late for that, I think, to be fair, but you're in Kent, I believe. What's going on where you are?
Good afternoon. So, yes, we spent the day here at an Age UK site. So there was a Chatty Charms lunch club where people from around the Gravesend area came for lunch to socialise and, of course, watch the budget as it happened. And for them, this was a moment just to see what's going to be in there for them and how they can benefit from that. So we did hear some changes when it comes to pensions. Two things have been in the headlines, particularly today. So this was the pension lifetime allowance. So this is a lifetime allowance which people can put money into over their career, and it was currently just over £1 million. And before today, there was speculation that this would be increased to around 1.6 to 1.8 million. But instead, the Chancellor announced that it's going to be abolished completely. In terms of what's going to happen next, the charge is going to be removed in April, so that's next month, and then next year it's going to be completely abolished. Now, this is according to the Treasury. So in 2024 April, it will be completely abolished. And then the second thing is the annual pension allowance. This is the money a person can pay into their pension each tax year. It's been at around £40,000 at the moment, and we heard today from the Chancellor that it's going to be increased by 50%, taking it to £60,000, allowing people to make savings in that area. And of course, straight after the budget, I spoke to some of the people here, mixed views, but we did hear from Maureen, and this is what she had to say.
It seems quite a good rise. It sounds good, but of course everything's going up. So I suppose at the end of the day, we'll be back to sort of square one. But I, for example, I know that I'll be able to manage because I do manage my money quite well. I'm not one for going out too much at my age. But it's nice to know that everybody's going to get a rise.
Now, it is worth mentioning that both allowances apply to private pensions. And of course, people this evening will be taking the time to see what this means for them. The mood here, though, was positive for some, others still having mixed opinions about the budget, and others, of course, were saying they need some time to take it all in. But plenty to go through, as we heard from the spring budget today.
Yes, Theo Chicomba there. Thank you very, very much. Right, OK, so to break this afternoon's budget down even further, there are winners, there are losers in our budget. Of course. I'm joined now by Director of Public Affairs at Pension B, Rebecca O'Connor, and we've got Communications Officer at the IEA, the Institute for Economic Affairs, Reem Ibrahim. Great stuff, both of you. I normally say ladies first, but there's no point this time, is there? I'll just throw a dart at the board and go for Rebecca. Rebecca, look, we are zoning in a little bit on pensions here. So millions of workers will get a pensions boost from the Chancellor, abolishing the lifetime pension allowance. But some pensioners are telling me, well, this is no good for me because I'm not a millionaire. Talk me through it.
Well, you know what? The lifetime allowance actually doesn't currently apply to 95% of pension savers. It really is the higher earners, the older workers, people with previous generous defined benefit, gold-plated final salary schemes from their dim and distant past that have now actually all added up into quite a chunk of money.
Well, supposedly, sorry to interrupt you on that one, Rebecca, but supposedly consultants and doctors, who are, of course, all about to go on strike because they've been incredibly hard done by over the years, but they are apparently within this pension bracket, which is remarkable, Rebecca, isn't it, for a group of very unfortunate individuals?
So they're senior NHS consultants. They are paid a lot. They're very, there's an undersupply of them, and they have had a particular issue with allowances. And it has been said that the Chancellor was actually trying to get these NHS consultants back to work. And, if he can get a few more higher earners or potential higher earners back to work as well, then that's great. But really, it was designed to get these people back in who are very much needed by the NHS.
Good stuff, Rebecca. Reem, I'll lob it your way now because, hey, there was no talk of housing. Was there? We're going for growth. We can't grow houses.
Well, you're exactly right. And the Chancellor did actually say that, no one should be pushed out of the workforce for tax reasons. Unfortunately, this is the case for a lot of young people. Now, I think that abolishing the lifetime allowance is definitely a positive move. It's good for a lot of those individuals that are sort of going to be incentivized to save more for their pensions, save more for their long-term economic prosperity. However, there was nothing in this budget for young people. It does feel as though a lot of these older people, or as Hunt said, the more experienced people clearly are being protected and clearly are being incentivized to work harder. However, for us young people, there aren't many prospects in this budget at all. No mention of housing, but also because of this fiscal drag, it means that as inflation rises, a lot of us are being pushed up into the higher tax brackets where we otherwise wouldn't have been. So we're not being incentivized to work harder here.
Well, I understand that, but Rebecca, I am very sympathetic to the older generation. I think that we owe everything to them as a nation, frankly, and these people will have paid into the system a lot longer than I have and paid a lot more into it, and, they deserve everything that they get, I think, Rebecca. So it is overall, would you regard it as being decent news for pensioners or just the wealthy pensioners?
Yeah, and I would actually say that it's good news for younger savers too, potentially, because what it means is it's an aspirational thing, isn't it? You might not have £1 million in your pension now, but one day you might go above $1 million, and it does just change the game slightly for people who are very diligent and really want to boost their pension pot. And on the point on younger workers too, actually, the increase to childcare and free childcare for younger families certainly is a boost, and it will help with the gender pension gap, because if parents are able to stay in work, they're obviously contributing to their pensions too. So that will indirectly increase pension contributions for younger people too.
That's interesting. Now, Reem, I want to talk to you about growth, because we've had the news that we're not going to go into a technical recession, which is fantastic. Labour, of course, accused of spreading fake news by essentially saying that we were going to do that. The growth forecast for the next 4 years, 1.8%, 2.5%, 2.1%, 1.9%. We are the fastest growing economy in the G7 last year as well. Are things good, or would the IEA and yourself have preferred Liz Truss back in the hot seat?
Well, I don't know if we'd particularly have an opinion on that, but what I will say is that I think that when we're looking at this budget as a whole, clearly we didn't see those same tax cuts that we saw proposed by the governments last year. What I think is clear about the impact that those unfunded tax cuts had is that it did spook the market. So at the moment, using this word growth is incredibly politically charged. I mean, we saw Keir Starmer use the word growth just a few months ago. Now they're talking about growth, but actually this is them pursuing an anti-growth agenda. So they can use the word growth, but if they're not implementing policies that are going to actually achieve that growth, then unfortunately we're going to still see very slow growth or no growth at all.
Yeah, look, both of you, thank you very, very much. Great way to kickstart this 5 o'clock hour. Really enjoyed that discussion. That's Rebecca O'Connor there, who is the Director of Public Affairs at Pension B and Communications Officer at the IEA, Reem Ibrahim. Yeah, great. We covered all bases. We went from pensions to childcare to growth to house building, you name it. We did it. So, has the Chancellor done enough to appease his critics? Whilst Jeremy Hunt set out his economic plans, tens of thousands of workers have been out on strike. I do think it might be news if they weren't on strike, but there we are. I am Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. to 7 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on the budget, and John says, I'm constantly hearing that childcare in the UK is higher than anywhere in Europe, the US, Canada and Australia. No one has explained why this is the case. I'm 80 years of age, have brought up 3 children with little or no handouts. This needs investigating and establish how all these other countries can provide childcare cheaper than we can here in the UK. Hey, it's a good point. I've got to be honest with you, John. I don't have the answers, mate, but we will endeavour to do our best. Sam from York says, I completely disagree that the government shouldn't help with childcare costs. Shouldn't help with childcare costs. OK. Years ago, house prices were based on one salary, and house prices these days need 2 incomes to pay mortgages and rents. Should only the very well-off have children? Don't you think that some mothers would love to have the choice not to work while their children are young? Right, OK, great stuff. So this is, I believe, anyway, councillors, I was saying earlier on, I was getting quite a lot of emails in, which surprised me at the time, but now I think about it a bit more, less so, from women who were saying, actually, this is a bad thing that the government is helping to pay for childcare. taxpayers are helping to pay for childcare. They were saying, oh, look, we don't want to pay for other people to have kids that they can't afford. That was a big one. But also people saying maybe the Conservatives should have been doing a bit more to help promote the quotes-unquote traditional family. So, you know, they were saying, and this is not my views, before anyone jumps on me on Twitter, we had several women coming in touch with me to say, look, why don't women stay at home, look after the kids a bit more? It's a good thing for the family, it's a good thing for the children. But this is the counterpoint to it, isn't it? Which is, as the government's trying to make, you get women back into work as quickly as possible, then that means they contribute to the economy as quickly as possible. We heard as well, didn't we, from a pensions expert who was saying it means they will pay into their own pension pot more, reduce the pension gender gap. So, yes, I can see the logic behind it. But, yes, a mixed bag when it comes to the childcare announcement. Steve says, to those arguing that people shouldn't have kids if they can't afford them, they're missing the point. Here we go. It's childcare that they can't afford, not the child itself. OK, interesting. Slight chicken and egg situation here, I think, Steve, but there we are. The more women who go back to work, the more people are paying the pensions of those already retired. It would be great if one parent could stay at home, but in today's world, you could only afford that if one parent was earning the big bucks. And yes, I'm very sympathetic towards all of that. Of course I am. I think that is probably quite a big reason for it. Look, I just want to veer us on to something else that happened earlier on, and I don't really want to let this go because I think in light of what was going on with the budget announcement, that clearly has got all the headlines. But there was Prime Minister's questions earlier on today, and did anybody else notice a very bizarre thing happen, which is that Keir Starmer got an absolute kicking from Rishi Sunak. Now, we have, and I believe we still do have, tens of thousands, some reports say hundreds of thousands, of public sector workers outside the House of Commons shouting in there saying we want a pay rise. Aren't these the people? Aren't these the people who the Labour Party and Keir Starmer are supposed to be championing? What did Keir Starmer go in with at PMQs? Gary Lineker and a few backbench Tory MPs saying that the BBC should lose the licence fee or sack him. He has 6 questions at Prime Minister's Questions, OK? And he used all 6 of them on Gary Lineker and the BBC and the Tories trying to cripple the licence fee, etc. Do you not think that was a bit weird? Do you not think that was a bit bizarre? And what it allowed was Rishi Sunak to hit back and just rattle off the list of good things that he's done. The AUKUS deal, the illegal immigration bill, the defence spending and the growth figures, etc. And just on that as well, I can't help but wonder whether or not the tide is starting to turn in the court of public opinion. A Redfield and Wilton poll showed that Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are separated by just 1 point in the opinion polls in blue wall seats, which is big news for Rishi Sunak. Also, new polling by pollster Matt Goodwin shows that more than half the country, 52%, back the illegal migration bill, wanting to remove illegal immigrants and block them from returning. Just 16% strongly disagree with the bill. So just your daily reminder that Twitter is not real life, ladies and gentlemen. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Get your views coming in. But Darren McCaffrey joins me now, GB News' political editor. And I want to pick up on this, actually, Darren. Thank you very much. Yes, great to have you back on the show, of course. Do you think that the tide is turning a little bit when it comes to public opinion? Are the Tories making a little bit of a surge at all?
Yeah, I think it's perfectly reasonable for Rishi Sunak to feel pretty chipper about the last couple of weeks. In fact, actually on the way here, Patrick, I bumped into a senior Conservative MP. He said he cannot remember, it's been a hell of a long time since he can remember, a 3-week period that seemed to have gone so well for the Conservative Party, with that Windsor framework, as you say, the deal with Emmanuel Macron and the publication of that immigration bill, and that AUKUS announcement over the weekend, which clearly, you know, standing alongside President Biden and Prime Minister Albanese, two of the UK's closest allies, would do you some good. And of course the rescue deal that happened over the weekend with the SVB bank. So yes, I think Rishi Sunak has got right to be chipper. Bit odd, as you say, for Keir Starmer to go on the BBC today, though in his defence he would say, you know, I've raised strikes quite a lot. I can't really talk about the budget because that's what I was going to do a couple of hours later. And his attempt, I suppose, today was in many ways is to go beyond Gary Lineker and link this back to the Prime Minister with the appointment of Richard Sharp as the BBC chairman. Though, as the Prime Minister made clear, that wasn't his decision. And it is interesting that at every opportunity he wants to distance himself from that decision to appoint Richard Sharp as chairman of the BBC. In saying that, there will be questions about this budget. There'll be questions not least all on the right of the Conservative Party about the tax burden on the country that this budget is going to continue to pursue. We're going to see the highest tax burden this country's ever seen, and also questions about where economic growth is coming from, because according to the OPR, actually a lot of this economic growth is going to come from increased migration in the years to come. But the mood on the Conservative backbenchers is pretty chipper. Clear that Rishi Sunak's in a pretty good mood. I've spent an awful lot of the last couple of days with him to and fro from the United States, and he seems like he is kind of comfortably sliding into kind of getting to grips with things. But all I would say is, as we've seen quite a lot in the past, governments can mess things up. And while they've had a good couple of weeks, it doesn't take much for the tide to turn.
Yes, look, absolutely. Darren, thank you very, very much. Darren McCaffrey there, GB News' political editor on Downing Street for us. And I think it's worthwhile us taking a step back. We've been banging on about this spring budget all day, and rightly so, of course. It is absolutely massive news, and it does very directly affect absolutely everybody's lives in the country. But if we just zoom out for a second, ladies and gents, and just have a look at maybe the job that Rishi Sunak is doing in general, the last two PMQs have been pretty good, especially today. Today's Prime Minister's question for Rishi Sunak was really good. Keir Starmer, I think, was trying to catch him out a little bit by talking about Gary Lineker, and Rishi Sunak made him look as silly as he sounded. And if you just look at some of the things that have taken place in the last few weeks, as Darren McCaffrey was alluding to there, we've got this AUKUS deal, so that's a big, big international defence deal. We've got the domestic defence spending as well. We've got pretty decent-ish growth figures when we're going to swerve a recession by the looks of things. They've got the illegal migration bill, which is, despite what you will read and see on Twitter, popular with the majority of people in this country. So actually, is Rishi Sunak doing quite a good job? And even people, and I'm keen to hear from you on this, gbviews at gbnews.uk, if you were a massive fan of Boris Johnson and you were very sad to see him go, or you just thought that maybe Rishi Sunak was in some way culpable to that, are you warming to Rishi Sunak in light of what we've just seen at the moment? gbviews at gbnews.uk. I have got loads more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, though. Great news for motorists, that's right. Find out why Jeremy Hunt has offered to fix something which has been driving motorists mad. See what we did there? Driving motorists mad for years. A little clue, we will fill you in very, very shortly. And we're heading up to Doncaster, to one of the red wall seats where people have felt neglected. Are they happy with Jeremy Hunt's package? But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories. Jeremy Hunt has announced his first budget as Chancellor, vowing to encourage millions to rejoin the workforce and boost Britain's financial growth. The Chancellor says the Office for Budget Responsibility now forecasts the UK will no longer enter recession this year. It says inflation is instead predicted to fall from 10.7% at the end of last year to 2.9% by the end of 2023. Labour responded by accusing the government of a managed decline of the country, describing the budget as a sticking plaster. Well, here are the key points. The Chancellor announced a change in the duty on draft products sold in pubs, allowing them to be up to 11 pence lower than supermarkets. The Treasury will freeze fuel duty for a further 12 months, abolish the lifetime allowance on tax-free pension savings, which originally stood at £1 million. The energy price guarantee will remain in place for another 3 months. That means the average household will pay £2,500 a year, and 4 million customers on prepayment meters will pay the same as those on direct debit. The Chancellor also announced an increase to the defence budget worth £11 billion over the next 5 years. And in a major shake-up of childcare provision, Jeremy Hunt unveiled that every child over the age of 9 months in eligible households will be offered 30 hours of free childcare a week. Now, union leaders have criticised the Chancellor's budget for failing to tackle ongoing strikes across the country. That's as thousands of teachers, junior doctors, tube drivers and BBC journalists took industrial action over issues including pay, jobs and pensions. Unite's General Secretary says Jeremy Hunt didn't prioritise the NHS, instead delivering a historic betrayal. In other news, the Defence Secretary says Moscow should respect international airspace after Russian jets collided with an American drone over the Black Sea yesterday. Ben Wallace says America has called the incident unprofessional, with the White House accusing Russia of recklessly colliding with its Reaper drone. It raises fears of an escalation between the two superpowers, with Russia calling it a provocation. Those are your latest news headlines. We're back again at 6.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. OK, I'm just going to do a couple of emails before we whiz you on to the rest of the show. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Just before we went to Polly there with the headlines, I was asking you to just zoom out a little bit from the budget and just have a look at the kind of job that you think Rishi Sunak is doing so far. I think Rishi is doing fantastically well. This is from Jennifer. Since he's come to power, he has slowly but surely started to sort out the mess left by his three predecessors. Go, Rishi, you have my vote. That's Jennifer. But, and this is very much the other side of it, John, getting in touch here to say, Patrick, you're punch drunk, mate. I wish. But there we go. Boats are still coming. Nothing changes. And we're going to be poorer. So there you go. So obviously there's certainly a mixed bag when it comes to Rishi. I mean, what led me to ask that question for you was what happened at PMQs earlier today, which was Keir Starmer ridiculously going in on multi-millionaire footballing pundit Gary Lineker instead of the fact that there were tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of striking public sector workers just shouting at him from outside the House of Commons. I mean, man of the people. It allowed Rishi Sunak to rattle off the things he's done in the last few weeks alone, and actually they are quite important when you look at it. You know, we've got, whatever your feelings are about the war in Ukraine, he's stuck by and furthered what Boris Johnson was doing there. There's the AUKUS deal, the submarine pact. You've got the illegal migration bill. Now, again, yes, it's important to say that nothing has really happened there yet, apart from the fact that it's going through, and it does have the support of, according to the latest polling, 52% of the British public, which is massive. And don't believe everything that you see on Twitter, people. And Jeremy Hunt was able to stand there and announce today that we're not going to go into a technical recession, according to the latest figures, and he can predict minor, but growth, nonetheless, over the next few years. And we were the fastest growing economy in the G7 last year, again, despite what you might be hearing from certain sectors online. So when you look at it like that, I just wonder whether or not the wind has been taken out of Keir Starmer's sails a little bit. Your views on all of this, of course, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Jason says this is on Labour, they will lose the election because of their obsession with Partygate and not sorting out the migration crisis. So that's where we are. Right, OK, keep your views coming in, people, because there's loads more still to come between now and 6. For all of you motorists, stay tuned. I will tell you what Jeremy Hunt has offered. He's going to fix something that has been driving you mad for years. Can you guess what it is? If not, well, I'll fill you in shortly. I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Well, here at GB News, you know there's only one opinion that we care about, and that is yours. And that is why tonight, Michelle Dewberry and Nigel Farage will be broadcasting live from Doncaster for the GB News Spring Budget Special. I'm very pleased to say that we can go live now to Doncaster to speak to GB News presenter Michelle Dewberry. Yes, good stuff. How's Donny?
Yes, hello. I've got to be honest, right? It's cold and it's wet, but it's Yorkshire. So for me, anyway, that is absolutely perfect. We're in a wonderful pub, although I've got to be honest, I'm in a van in the pub car park right now, which is less glamorous, but any minute now, I shall be in a pub in Doncaster. Very excited to be there. Can't wait to meet the great people of Doncaster. And a couple of mates have travelled up from Hull as well.
Fantastic. So I'm loving this. So no doubt Nigel Farage is already in the pub. But what have you got coming up? What's the plan then? What's the situation? Why are we in Doncaster?
Well, there's only one story in town. I'm going to give you one guess as to what it is. Don't mess it up, Patrick. It's a big moment. What one story do you reckon we're going to be focusing in on tonight?
Space. No, the budget.
Yes, indeed, the budget. And there's so much to get into, isn't there? So I'm asking viewers at home as well, what has it meant to you? Is it a good day for you, a bad day? Is it an utter irrelevance because you don't feel like it's impacted your life in any way, shape or form? Housewife's favourite, Ben Habib, he's going to be keeping me company, as is Joe Phillips. They've got very strong views, so I can't wait to get into those as well.
Fantastic stuff. This is gold. Michelle, well, look, people are going to have to make sure they stay tuned in, and I hope that they let you out of the back of that van and into the pub at some point too, Michelle.
I know. There's alcohol over there. Let me out.
Let me out. Well, you can make the most of, before the new alcohol duty kicks in. If you're a fan of warm British ale, which I know Nigel Farage is, then you're all right. But if you like anything else, then you're screwed, aren't you, Michelle?
Well, if you're as sophisticated as me and you're more a wine drinker, then it's not been great news, has it?
No, that's all right, although I have seen you drink. No, I'm only joking, Michelle. Look, take care. All right, I'll see you in a sec. Michelle Dewberry there, the wonderful Michelle Dewberry, GB News presenter, and we are live from Doncaster with her and Nigel Farage later. Make sure you stay tuned for that. It's going to be gold. OK, so there we go. Now, to give her take on the announcements made earlier this afternoon, I am joined by the charity director at Age UK. It's Caroline Abrahams. Because pensioners were some of the big announcements for pensioners today. Caroline, I'm just going to ask you, pretty straightforward, what do you make of it in your capacity as an Age UK representative? Were you happy? Were you not happy?
We liked some of it. We were a bit disappointed with other bits. The bit that we really liked, is really important for pensioners, particularly if they're on a low income, was the extension of the energy bill support through to July. It was going to stop in April, but the Chancellor's done a very, very welcome U-turn. After a lobby led by Martin Lewis, amongst others, we were part of it too. And so that protection continues. It's really, really important. Of course, it doesn't mean people's bills are going to go down, but it does stop them from going up. So that's really important. But of course, we would like that security to continue for people into the future. And we're a bit disappointed that he didn't announce that he was going to introduce an energy social tariff today, although we think the government might well do that in the next few weeks. So that was the standout measure for us. Also really pleased that he said he was going to equalise how much you pay if you buy your fuel through a prepay meter rather than over direct debit. That's going to benefit 600,000 poorer households that are made up with older people. That's going to make quite a big difference to them as well. But the disappointment for us really was that he didn't say anything about investing more in social care. And given that there are loads of people in their 50s and 60s who have to stop work in order to provide care for a loved one because there's not a good, reliable and affordable local service, We think that's a big missed opportunity, given that tackling economic inactivity was a big goal of his in his budget today.
Well, yes, absolutely. And can I just get your take on, we do have a lot of younger viewers as well, and they say things to me like, well, there was nothing about house building in that, we're being priced out the market, and they needed to do a bit to help us with childcare and, you know, and get more people, frankly, reproducing, I suppose, really, and able to look after the kids as well. It can't all just be about people in their later years. So how would you respond to people, younger people, who thought there needed to be more stuff for the young uns in there?
Well, might well be right. I might well agree. But obviously, I'm here to talk about older people. It doesn't have to be either or.
Either
or. Of course, if you have social care, you're not just helping older people. You're helping lots of younger disabled people as well, and you're helping the wheels go round of our economy. I think that's really the point. So I totally see why he's chosen to invest in childcare. But actually, there are loads of families not only trying to care for their children, but also worried about their older relatives. So from a family's point of view, it would have been great to see both.
OK, so some of your highlights then, I suppose, there is, of course, towards the top end of the pensioners, the lifetime pension allowance being abolished. OK, that's good stuff, an effort to keep people in work for longer. Also, as well as you've rightly identified as well, another thing potentially for slightly more elderly people, which is, of course, the energy price cap, etc. So that's quite good. So some wins, but maybe a bit more could have been done. Caroline, thank you very, very much. And thank you very much for all of the great work that you do as well at Age UK. The charity is very close to my heart. So Caroline Abraham's there, who is the charity director at Age UK. I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but if you've got a few quid knocking about, and maybe slip it Age UK's way. But anyway, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has announced a major boost in funding for communities to help address the current pothole crisis. So the spending review allocates £500 million every year to the Pothole Funds scheme. And so we are going to be talking about that very shortly. I know it's the bane of a lot of your existence, isn't it, really, which is, you know, you're driving along and then wallop, there you go. How much should it really cost to fill a pothole in, for goodness sake? Anyway, that is going to be a problem no longer, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to talk very shortly to Mr. Pothole. Yes, that's right. Anyway, as I'm sure you are well aware, GB News is the People's Channel. This show is nothing without you lot at home. And a bit like Michael Gove in the Brexit referendum, I've had quite enough of experts. And joining me now to give their hot takes on this afternoon's budget announcement is GB News viewers. It's Julie Ford from Bedfordshire and Lee Harris from Bristol. Great stuff, both of you. Fantastic stuff. Lee, where are you on the... Oh, no, sorry. It's always ladies first. Apologies. Unless, Lee, you've chosen to do a Sam Smith and identify as someone else. But Julie...
Agenda, Patrick.
Yeah, I did. You know what? I did, and I'm not sorry. Anyway, right, Julie, I'll start with you, OK? So what do you make of the budget, Julie?
I've got to be honest, I found it quite a positive budget for me. And I know a lot of people have focused on the fact that we haven't seen tax implications for the personal tax allowance. We haven't seen national insurance and stuff like that be affected. But when you look at what Jeremy Hunt's actually trying to do here, I think he's got more of a long game feature. I mean, for me, a couple of things that really stood out was the... Work and Pensions Secretary is going to be releasing a white paper to reform the disability benefit system. That's something that definitely needs to be reformed. We've seen so many problems with the assessment process for that. And I think, again, the amount of money that he's put into regeneration in areas that at the moment have high levels of unemployment. That regeneration is going to be putting jobs out there in the places where it needs. So I think although from an immediate impact, no, it probably hasn't benefited a lot of people, I think long term this has been a very positive budget for me.
Yeah, OK, good stuff. Lee, I'll get your views on it, because I know that some of the people who will be regarded as the big losers in this budget might be small business owners, OK, which is, I think, for supposedly a nation of shopkeepers, not necessarily great stuff, is it, Lee? Your views?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what was just said, actually. Overall, not that bad. But I agree with Liam Halligan's take on it. It was a kind of steady-as-she-goes budget. Nothing radical, just a bit of tinkering around the edges. You know, a bit, if anything, lacklustre and uninspiring, certainly looking at it from a small business point of view. But in my view, as a business owner, there was a huge missed opportunity on lowering the tax burden further, which, you know, irrespective of what Jeremy Hunt says, has the potential to massively boost growth. You know, he should have scrapped that rising corporation tax and, in my view, cut it to the lowest in the G7. But the good news is the headlines about the economy are much better than the doom and gloom predicted previously.
Yeah.
And after saying we were going to have a year-long recession, we're now forecast to avoid a technical recession.
Well, we are, and in fact, I think this is a good way of moving on. Forgive me, because I'm now 2 hours and 50 minutes into relentless budget chat, right? So at this point, my brain is fried. I'm sure everyone else is as well. I'd kind of like to ask you, Julie, a bit about your take on the reaction from some of the opposition benches, because we got a more rosy outlook on Britain's economy than many of us were expecting, right, in terms of with the growth figures, no recession, etc. And I couldn't help but wonder whether or not that was almost greeted with a bit of disdain for the Labour benches, because it did seem to me as though they quite wanted it to be doom and gloom, and it wasn't. What did you make of all of that, Julie?
Yeah, I have to admit, it felt to me when Keir Starmer stood up to put his opposition opinion forward, he actually had nothing to say. He was looking for the negatives in what ultimately has been quite a positive budget. And to me, unfortunately, Keir Starmer is just starting to be a bit of white noise. It's just an annoying noise in the background that I just keep hearing. He's got an awful lot to say without actually saying anything. I had a boss many years ago that used to say to me, "Bring me solutions, Julie Ford, not problems." So, Keir Starmer, bring me solutions, not problems.
Oh, fantastic. I love it. Absolutely love it. Wonderful stuff. Yeah, I used to have a newspaper editor that used to say that to me as well. I hated it. But anyway. Right, Lee, I'm going to ask you as well about this. Now, just in the round, Rishi Sunak's performance, there was a lot of persuading I think he needed to do for the average individual out there on the street. When he first took the job, there was a lot of things going around about, was he someone who stabbed Boris in the back and all of this stuff, and was he a bit dull? When you actually look on paper at what he's done so far, I think he's doing all right, isn't he? I mean, we've got AUKUS, the legal migration bill. Again, despite what you see on Twitter, it is popular. The latest polling is 52% of people basically back it, OK, which is enough. Let's be honest, it was enough for Brexit. Defence spending, the growth figures, etc. I mean, I think he's doing all right, isn't he, Sunak?
Yeah, I think that is. I think that's fair to say. You probably know my feelings on Rishi Sunak haven't been particularly great because I was a bit of a Boris fan. But no, I think there are some things that are not necessarily his doing, which are he's able to take the credit for. But especially with these predictions of inflation coming down, you can't really say that the government's had a huge impact on that. But what's really going to count is whether people are he is going to grow on people, is if people can really see a change of circumstances in their financial situation. And there are a couple of good things that are going to help with the cost of living crisis that come from this budget, which are probably going to benefit him too. So we got the fuel duty freeze, we got the energy price guarantee that's going to carry on for another 3 months. I think the booze duty is going to stay put too, which is going to be quite popular, and of course the childcare stuff, which is going to help the economy. But what our judgment on Rishi Sunak is going to be based on how the economy is doing by middle of next year. End of this year, middle of next year, and if these predictions, if they do happen, I actually think we'll probably exceed them. It is going to benefit Rishi Sunak, and
I think he's in with a shout. I think you know what? I think he's got a decent shout. Certainly, if you'd have asked me this 3 weeks ago, I would have had a much different view than I've got today, and so that's, I suppose, a step in the right direction for Rishi. Both of you thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you very much. And Julie, especially, you did bring me solutions, not problems there. So Julie Ford from Bedfordshire and Lee Harris from Bristol, two of my favourite GB viewers. Rolled into one lovely package. Right, so, moving on. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has announced a major boost in funding for communities to help address the current pothole crisis. I'm not telling you, it's a crisis out there, people. You can't move for potholes. The spending review allocates £500 million every year to the pothole funds. But how many potholes are there? 500 million quid. But Mr Hunt decided to increase that fund by a further £200 million for next year. Delivering his budget speech, he said the wet, then cold winter resulted in him receiving strong representations from MPs and councillors about the curse of potholes. Hey, look, I completely agree. It just seemed like rather a lot of money, but there we are. The announcement comes as pothole complaints have seemed to rise significantly in recent years. To shed some more light on this, I am now joined by pothole campaigner Mark Morrell, also known as Mr Pothole. Fantastic stuff. Look, Mark, is this welcome news for you? I think you're in a car. Hopefully that car won't be driving over any potholes anytime soon.
a few on the way here. Welcome news, because it's 200 million that there wasn't going to happen in the first place, but it's only half of what they cut from the road maintenance budget last year. So we're not actually any better off. And to put it in context, there's a £12 billion backlog in road maintenance in this country. And next week, when the report comes out, I strongly suspect it'll be even higher. So, to be honest, it's like peeing in the sea.
Lovely stuff, lovely stuff. OK, all right, the imagery there from Mr Pothole. But look, forgive me, how bad is the nation's pothole problem? Look, I know they're annoying, they're terrible, and it's all... I mean, how bad is it, really?
Right, it's reported that one cyclist is killed or seriously injured each week as a result of potholes.
Gosh.
And over 70+ motorcyclists are killed or seriously injured as a result of badly maintained roads. That has a cost to society, that impacts families.
Yeah.
Also, there was a report done about 10 years ago that badly maintained roads was costing the UK economy £5 billion a year. Well, now, roll forward with inflation, particularly with the increases more recently, you can probably double that. So my argument is that idea of solutions, it's fairly easy. You actually wasting money spending repairing potholes. You should be resurfacing your roads, putting in £3 billion a year, every year, like other countries do a long-term plan in Japan, for example, and resurface our roads. In 10 years' time, 95% of potholes are gone.
Well, is it a little bit like Trigger's broom out of Only Fools and Horses? We keep patching up the roads instead of just resurfacing them in one job lot. Is that what you would advocate then?
Yeah, that's the only answer, because patch and mend, as quickly as they repair one appears after. We see poor quality repairs. I've seen some lethal ones in places like Glasgow. I mean, there's a campaign group up there that are very active. It's got 10,000 members every day reporting defects. I mean, I've helped a number of groups, and it is a serious side. I mean, you know, it's costing motorists an awful lot of money, and extra wear and tear and tyres, and they get very little chance of claiming their money back.
Mark, I've got to ask, I know we're a bit pressed for time here, but you are Mr Pothole, and just something a little bit personal here, if that's all right. Is there a big pothole community?
It's growing. I've got a pothole army on social media, various groups.
What are you called? Please tell me it's the Potheads.
And I set up National Pothole Day some years ago to keep the attention. And I even took a tank trying to get Boris when he was in power round Parliament Square for PMQs. But you couldn't believe this. We were held up on a low loader on the Westway for a pothole. I was on the radio doing a radio interview.
This is fantastic. OK, all right, look, but I could talk to you all day. I'm going to have to get you back. Any excuse for me now to talk about potholes, you're going to be back on.
Next week.
All right, why not?
The alarm survey comes out. Massive backlog increase. You'll see it next Tuesday comes out.
Oh, well, all right, I'll see you on Tuesday. There we go. Mark Morrill there is also known as Mr Pothole. Great stuff. That is my kind of guest, ladies and gentlemen. That's it from me, though. Jubes & Co. is coming up next, and that's going to be live from Doncaster. It's followed as well. We've got live pictures. Oh, it's hotting up. The people of Doncaster, they're out in force, aren't they? So it's going to be Jubes. This can be Nigel Farage. Why, you may ask? Well, it's a red wall. See, they've traditionally felt a bit left behind. What has this budget done for them? Oh, hey, there you go. Hey, people of Doncaster. There we go. Fantastic. Right, OK, Michelle Dewberry will join you very, very shortly from the lovely Doncaster. I will see you tomorrow at 3 p.m. All right. Actually, no, I won't. I'm at Cheltenham, but I'll see you on Friday. Bye.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended